A comeback. My late blooming success in the world of Greek mythology. Chapter 21. Li Hua's birth was like the brightest flame ignited in Hephaestus's heart. It proved the feasibility of a path. A path to break free from the will of the gods, to define life and destiny with his own hands. And the extension of this path was not limited to the creation of life. It also included creating a kingdom that could bear all his ambitions and turn them into reality. Father God, are you conceiving a new work? Li Hua's voice sounded from behind him. She stood quietly, her golden eyes seemingly swirling with starlight, as if interpreting every subtle expression on Hephaestus's face. Hephaestus snapped out of his contemplation, turned to look at her, and then at the three cyclops not far away who were gazing at him with reverence. It was time. It was time to give this volcano a true heart. Argas, Brontes, Steropus. Hephaestus's voice echoed in the empty workshop. My lord. The three giants responded in unison, their voices filled with unprecedented fanaticism. Our current forges are too primitive, too scattered. Hephaestus's gaze swept over the still burning but chaotic lava pools. They can only produce crude tools, not true divine artifacts. From today onwards, we will pour all our efforts into building an unprecedented super forge. He paused, and said, word by word. I name it, the Forge of Fate. Fate. This word, like a bolt of lightning, struck the hearts of the three giants. They were creations abandoned by fate, imprisoned deep within this sunless volcano, yet their master was going to personally forge fate. What boundless ambition, what magnificent aspirations. Please command us. The three giants knelt on one knee, fierce flames burning in their massive single eyes. It's not easy to update. Remember to share 101kanshu.com. Hephaestus did not produce blueprints, because the most perfect blueprints were imprinted in his mind and were being digitized in real time by Li Hua. First step, the energy core. Hephaestus's gaze turned to the deepest part of the volcano, the forbidden land where Typhon was sealed. Steropus, you are most sensitive to the rage of the 100-headed dragon. I want you to go there and extract the purest rage crystal. Not just one piece, but continuously, to make it the never-ending reactor for our forge. As you command, my lord. The dragon's rage shall be your most loyal fuel. Steropus departed, his steps filled with pride. Second step, the circulation system. Hephaestus looked at the other two giants. Argas, Brontes, I want you to tear open the boundary between the mountain and the sea. You must excavate two colossal channels, one to draw cold seawater into the heart of the volcano, the other to channel burning lava into designated areas. Cold and hot, water and fire, under my design, will form a perfect energy cycle, providing cooling for the forge and also providing its power. The two giants let out an excited roar and departed. The entire Mount Etna began to tremble slightly due to their actions. A massive project thus began. Hephaestus stood in place. He was the true chief designer of this forge. He stretched out his hand, and divine power surged forth like a tide. The hard obsidian ground began to melt and reshape, and an enormous, incredibly complex deep pit slowly formed beneath his feet. That was the main foundation of the forge. Countless profound runes were automatically imprinted on every corner of the foundation under his will. Some controlled temperature, some guided energy, some reinforced the structure. This was a god, using his authority to write the fundamental laws for an industrial marvel. This process was incredibly complex. Any tiny error could lead to the entire forge collapsing completely the moment it was activated. But beside Hephaestus stood Li Hua. Father God, the energy node for Circuit 3, the overload threshold can be increased by another 3,000ths, which will be beneficial for future upgrades. According to calculations, the optimal inlet angle for the cooling water channel is 37.5 degrees, which can maximize the kinetic energy generated by the impact of seawater. Material ratio analysis complete. Adding 7% stardust iron to the base can perfectly neutralize the chaotic divine power escaping from the rage crystal. Li Hua stood quietly, golden data streams cascading through her eyes like a waterfall. Every concept Hephaestus described to her was instantly understood, analyzed, calculated, and optimized. Suggestions were proposed in the most precise language. She was a wisp of Hephaestus's soul, containing his technological concepts from his original world. She was a super terminal born for creation. Any complex calculation that a human brain couldn't handle was, for her, merely an instant. With her assistance, Hephaestus's construction speed was incredibly fast. Days later, when the three giants returned after completing their respective tasks, an abyss of steel, unlike anything they had ever seen in their lives, lay before them. Countless pipes intertwined like the blood vessels of a giant dragon, and standardized platforms were arranged neatly like a beehive. This was no forge, this was clearly a city of steel. My lord, this is all you, Argus's voice trembled. It is us. Hephaestus corrected him, his face a little pale, but his eyes shone with astonishing brightness. Now, begin the final assembly. Under his command, the three giants carefully and perfectly connected the waterways and lava pipes they had excavated to the interfaces on the main body of the forge. Steropus, holding a fist-sized crimson crystal, came to the top of the forge's core. It was the Rage Crystal. Li Hua. I am here, Father God. Activate the energy confinement field, at 70% power. Command confirmed. All relevant runes in the core reaction chamber were instantly activated. Buzz. A pale golden energy shield, composed of divine power, formed within the reaction chamber. Drop it. Hephaestus commanded. Steropus released his hand, and the rage crystal fell into it. The turbulent energy instantly erupted, violently striking the energy shield, but it was fiercely suppressed, tamed, and finally transformed into the most stable and purest energy, flowing along the preset circuits to the entire forge. Booming. The entire volcanic kingdom let out a low, powerful roar. Cold seawater was introduced, instantly vaporized by the core's high temperature, turning into high-pressure steam that drove the massive, rune-etched turbines to spin wildly. Blazing lava was diverted into individual smelting pools, awaiting processing commands. Modular production lines, composed of conveyor belts and robotic arms, made, clacking, sounds as they were driven by steam power, entering standby mode. An unprecedented, semi-automated, self-circulating energy superforge was officially activated. This was the first perfect combination of Hephaestus's wisdom, Li Hua's calculations, and the Cyclops' strength. Li Hua. Hephaestus looked at the magnificent scene before him and issued the first production command. Attempt to produce a standard, bronze breastplate. Command received, generating production process. Process generated, command issued to production line 1. No sooner had Li Hua's voice fallen. The ore feeding port in the distance automatically opened, and the sorted copper and tin ores accurately dropped into the smelting pool. The alloy liquid was refined in a very short time and automatically injected into a breastplate mold. After rapid cooling through the cooling channels, the nascent breastplate was grasped by a robotic arm and sent onto the conveyor belt. After pressing, polishing, quenching, all within a few minutes. With a soft clang, a bronze breastplate, gleaming with metallic luster, exquisitely crafted, and without any flaws, dropped from the end of the production line into the finished goods bin. The three Cyclops were dumbfounded. In the past, forging such a breastplate would take them an entire day, and the quality depended entirely on their feel. But now, it had become an industrial product on an assembly line. Hephaestus slowly walked forward and picked up the breastplate, which still carried a trace of warmth. What he saw was not a simple piece of armor. What he saw were the divine armors on countless future heroes, the endless armies beneath the walls of Troy, and his first cornerstone for leveraging the entire world of Greek mythology. The volcanic kingdom now had the ability to mass produce. Hephaestus was currently standing on the observation deck of the furnace's core. Beside him, Li Hua extended her hands, and countless streams of golden data flowed from her fingertips, intertwining in the air to form a massive, three-dimensional operational interface made of light. The entire furnace's operational status, energy flow rate, material reserves, and production sequence were all displayed on this light screen in an incredibly intuitive manner. This was the operating system he and Li Hua had jointly programmed for the Destiny Furnace. He was the administrator with the highest authority. Li Hua was the central processing unit with infinite computing power. And the three Cyclops became the first batch of excellent operators under this system. The roar of the Destiny Furnace had become the rhythm of the Volcano Kingdom's heartbeat. But for Hephaestus, this heart's beat was not yet perfect. The nascent energy still contains Typhon's tyrannical will. Through the specially designed crystal wall, One could see the wrath crystal stably releasing energy, but there were always a few extremely fine, barely discernible dark red energy strands, like untamed wild horses, impacting the energy circuits. This will accelerate the wear and tear of the circuits, increase risks, and reduce the stability of the creations. For ordinary blacksmiths, controlling the wrath crystal was already an impossible miracle. But for Hephaestus, who was determined to use the furnace fire to leverage the entire mythical world, any slight flaw could become a fatal mistake at a critical moment in the future. What he wanted was absolute perfection. Lihua, based on the rune sequence I just entered, construct an energy purification array model and simulate its operational results. Instruction received, beginning construction. Data streams flashed rapidly in Lihua's eyes. Hephaestus did not intend to waste materials. Instead, he provided several solutions for Lihua to simulate in advance and choose the best one. Eventually, one solution stood out after several simulations. This is it, Hephaestus decided. Golden divine fire flowed from his fingertips, transforming into countless flexible yet sturdy golden threads. Under his control, these golden threads began to weave an incredibly complex and precise filter net within the main energy pipeline of the furnace core. Each mesh was a purification rune. Each node was a stable beacon. When the raging energy torrent passed through again, those dark red tyrannical energies were stripped away and decomposed one by one, like silt filtered out by rocks in a rapids, eventually turning into harmless waste heat carried away by the cooling circulation system. What remained was only the purest, most docile fire of creation. Father God, energy purity has increased by 13%, and stability is approaching the theoretical peak. Lihua reported the data precisely. Hephaestus nodded. It still wasn't enough. He walked towards production line number 1 for mass-produced breastplates. Here, there's a missing feedback loop. He pointed to the end of the production line. The quality of the finished product shouldn't just be judged by our eyes. Saying this, he again took out a crystal, melted it with divine fire, and stretched it into several translucent fine threads. He connected these threads, like neurons, to various key nodes of the production line, and finally converged them into Lihua's computational core. From now on, the data of every finished product will be recorded in real time. Dimensions, density, hardness, energy conductivity. If a flawed product deviates from the preset values, you must immediately calculate backward, identify which link went wrong, automatically calibrate it, and finally report back to me. Hephaestus's voice was calm, yet carried an unquestionable authority. He didn't want a semi-automatic factory, but an intelligent factory, capable of self-correction and self-evolution. Now, under Hephaestus's continuous refinement, Lihua's millisecond-accurate calculations, and the Cyclops' unreserved execution, the Destiny Furnace was undergoing a transformation. Its roar became deeper and more powerful, as if a giant beast had found its most comfortable breathing rhythm. Every bit of energy was utilized to its fullest, and every production process was seamlessly connected. The raw, violent fire element within the volcano was completely tamed, sorted, and transformed into pure, orderly creative power. The entire aura of Sicily was subtly changing in this imperceptible way. Hephaestus was very satisfied with this. His volcanic kingdom was growing silently yet steadfastly, like a giant tree rooted deep in the Earth's core. However, as the Earth's pulse became stable and orderly, the ocean's wrath was quietly gathering. In the deep sea, at the temple of Poseidon. There was no light here, only endless, absolute silence and high pressure that made one's soul tremble. The magnificent palace was not cast from gold and silver, but carved from entire blocks of abyssal divine stone, as deep and dark as night. The massive pillars were the petrified skeletons of ancient sea beasts. Upon the throne, a majestic figure slowly opened his eyes, as profound as the deep sea. The king of the sea, Poseidon. He was in a very bad mood. Ever since that mysterious channel, which he could neither capture nor hear, appeared in the ocean, he had felt an unprecedented offense. The ocean was his kingdom. Every drop of water should flow according to his will. Every sound should propagate within his authority. That mysterious signal was like a poisonous thorn embedded deep in his divine soul, constantly reminding him that there was a blind spot in his rule. He had swept his divine sense across the entire ocean but found nothing. The source of that signal seemed not to exist in this world. But today, he sensed something unusual. His divine sense, as usual, patrolled his territory, and when it swept past Sicily, he paused slightly. Previously, the volcano only emitted wild, chaotic fire energy, the suppressed rage of Typhon. But now, that aura had changed. It had become orderly, precise, and full of vibrant creativity. Like a master craftsman, shaping a rough stone into a perfect work of art. Creation. Poseidon's knuckles gently tapped the shaft of his trident. Two things instantly connected in his mind. A mysterious channel that could block his perception. A chaotic volcano that suddenly erupted with astonishing creativity. The answer was already self-evident. It's it. That fellow hiding in the dark, who blasphemed his authority over the ocean, is hiding in this volcano. An emerging, unknown deity. Or a remnant of some titan. Poseidon didn't care who the other party was, he only knew that his authority would not be challenged. To act directly. To stir up monstrous waves, trigger world-ending earthquakes, and wipe that small volcano off the face of the earth. No. That would be too crude and beneath him. He was one of the three main gods who shared the world with Zeus and Hades. To personally overturn the table for what might just be a noisy insect would only make the gods on Mount Olympus laugh. He needed a warning, a test. A strike sufficient to display his majesty and also to probe the opponent's true strength. A cruel smile flashed in Poseidon's eyes. He slowly rose from his throne, trident in hand, symbolizing his divine authority over the ocean. With a single stride, he arrived outside the temple, in the depths of a dead, dark trench. This was his pet zoo, and also his arsenal. Countless terrifying beasts defeated and sealed in ancient wars slept here. Poseidon's gaze swept over the sleeping figures, finally resting on the deepest, darkest area. There, not even light could reach, only pure, soul-freezing darkness. Awaken. His voice resonated directly within that sleeping will, not through the seawater. My hungriest child. He gently raised his trident, and a faint blue divine light burst from its tip, piercing the endless darkness and illuminating that forbidden place. It was a terrifying sea monster beyond description. Its body was forged from the hardest black iron from the river Styx, absorbing all surrounding light. Its carapace was covered with grotesque barbs and ancient cursed runes. Hundreds of eyes of varying sizes, glowing crimson, were haphazardly distributed on its head, filled with pure malice and hunger, devoid of any intelligence. Its name was Progenitor of Cetus. It was the ancestor of all giant sea monsters, Poseidon's proudest and most secret weapon of war, kept in the abyss. It had no intelligence, only the instinct to execute commands, and the desire to devour everything. A cold, emotionless will crossed space and was directly injected into the mind of the progenitor of Cetus. Go to that fire-breathing island. Crush its shores, tear apart its defenses. Let me see what surprises its master is hiding. Roar. The progenitor of Cetus let out a silent roar, which transformed into a tangible shockwave, cracking the surrounding seabed. The next second, its massive body transformed into a black lightning bolt, without stirring a single superfluous ripple, and at a speed completely inconsistent with its size, it sped towards the surface, towards Mount Etna. A trial from the deep sea had arrived. A shadow born from the endless abyss was rushing irresistibly towards the land where the fire of creation had just ignited. Every heartbeat of the crucible of destiny was tempering Hephaestus's divine soul. It was not a cold construct, but an extension of his will and authority, a ceaselessly beating heart of steel within the territory of his divine kingdom. Every roar represented a surge of violent energy from the deep core of the earth, being tamed, refined, and transformed into pure creative power. This power flowed through the furnace's circulatory system, coursing through every inch of the volcano's land. The birth of every creation contained the concept of creation itself. This concept, like 100 rivers flowing into the sea, fed back into Hephaestus's body. This was a perfect cycle, a magnificent sublimation concerning creation itself. A gradual mastery over his authority. Hephaestus, seated upon the lava throne, felt his divine body undergoing an unprecedented, profound transformation. His muscles grew denser, every inch containing a contained explosive force capable of shaking mountains. The contours of his face shed the last trace of youthful greenness, becoming sharp and defined, as if carved by a knife and axe, The innate profoundness in his brow had now solidified into the dignified bearing of a monarch who commands respect without needing anger. When he opened his eyes again, stars seemed to be born and extinguished within the depths of his black pupils. From a boy of 15 or 16, he had matured into a young man in his early 20s. His flawed, limping foot remained his eternal mark, but this imperfection, juxtaposed against his now nearly perfect physique, added a chilling, tragic beauty, a refusal to yield to fate. He slowly rose, and an invisible aura, heavy as a mountain, quietly spread out from him. This growth was no longer merely a physical change. It was the solidification of his authority, the leap of his divinity. If the previous him was a divine weapon with exposed sharpness, then the current him was a king reigning over a domain, having fully contained all his sharpness within the sheath. Father God, Lihua's voice sounded behind him, a flicker of data resembling satisfaction passing through her golden eyes. The structure of your divine body has approached the perfect form for your current divine power level. Hephaestus nodded, about to speak. Just then, a sharp, icy alarm, not auditory, but exploding directly within the conscious link between Hephaestus and Lihua. It was the highest level alert from the cooling circulation system at the very bottom of the crucible of destiny, the system connected to the ocean. The calm vanished instantly from Lihua's face, and golden data streams refreshed frantically like a waterfall in her eyes. Father God. Abnormally high energy signature detected. An immense creature, with mass and energy signatures beyond imagination, is vertically ascending at extremely high speed from 10,000 meters beneath the sea. Its target is us. Before her words finished, the entire Mount Etna began to tremble violently. This was not internal vibration, but an external, heavy, repeated impact. It was as if a battering ram from the abyss was relentlessly pounding the seabed foundation of Sicily. Boom! With a colossal sound unlike any before, the defensive boundary of the volcanic kingdom, the coastline constructed of the sturdiest volcanic rock, was violently smashed open, leaving a huge breach by an irresistible force. Cold, dark, and salty seawater rushed in like a breaching flood. Hephaestus's gaze instantly turned icy. He took a single step, and his figure appeared at the peak of the volcano. He looked toward the coastline. The sight before him caused his deep eyes to narrow slightly. The normally blue and calm Mediterranean Sea was now churning violently, like boiling water. An unimaginable, sky-obscuring gigantic shadow was slowly rising from the seabed. Where the shadow passed, the seawater seemed to be drained away, and the sky itself dimmed. Following that, a gigantic claw, indescribable and seemingly cast from 10,000 years of profound iron, tore through the surface of the sea and slammed heavily onto the coastline of Sicily, carrying infinite malice and the aura of destruction. Boom! The earth wailed, and rocks shattered. Beneath the giant claw, the sturdy coastline was effortlessly ground into dust, like a fragile biscuit. My lord! The three Cyclops appeared immediately behind Hephaestus. They looked at the giant claw, which, having only revealed a corner, already exuded world-destroying power, and their massive single eyes were filled with shock and solemnity. What is that thing? Brontes' voice trembled. Poseidon's pet. Hephaestus's voice was icy and sharp. He didn't even need to consult the code to detect the aura of the king of the seas from that pure, ancient malice emanating from the deep ocean. It seems our deep sea echo has successfully captured the attention of the sea god. The full appearance of the sea monster finally broke the surface. It was a colossal, pitch-black shelled beast, larger than a mountain range. Its carapace was covered in savage barbs and glowing curse runes, as if it wore the abyss itself. Hundreds of scarlet eyes, like blood-colored gems embedded in armor, opened and closed erratically, radiating pure hunger and tyranny devoid of any intelligence. The progenitor of Cetus. Roar. The sea monster opened its massive maw, large enough to swallow an island, and let out a roar that directly assaulted the soul. A black column of water, mixed with high-pressure seawater and cursed divine power, tore through the air like a siege cannon, blasting toward the core of Mount Etna. Arrogance. Brontes roared and stepped forward. He slammed his mountain-like great hammer onto the ground, and a thunderous roar erupted from his mouth. Buzz. A visible, earthen yellow sonic barrier instantly materialized in front of the volcano. Boom. The black water column violently struck the sonic barrier. Two distinct divine powers violently collided and annihilated each other, creating a deafening crash. Steam billowed, and curses spread everywhere. Bronte's barrier lasted less than 3 breaths before cracking and shattering completely. His small mountain-like body was rocked by the enormous impact, forcing him to stumble backward and leave several huge footprints in the ground. This thing, its power is tremendous. Bronte's massive single eye was filled with shock. Leave it to me. Argus roared, plunging his hands violently into the ground. Smelting, earth spears. Under his will, the volcano's rock layers were instantly melted, purified, and reshaped. The next second, dozens of massive stone spears, forged from the hardest obsidian and tipped with burning lava flames, erupted from the ground beneath the sea monster like bamboo shoots after rain. Thud, thud, thud. The stone spears slammed violently against the progenitor of Cetus's pitch-black carapace, producing a series of jarring, dull thuds. However, aside from scattering large amounts of dirt and rock upon the shell, they failed to leave even a white mark. Its carapace was tempered by Poseidon using the waters of the Styx. Our physical attacks won't be very effective against it. Steropus said in a deep voice, sensing the divine power fluctuation of near-absolute defense emanating from the creature. The hundreds of scarlet eyes of the sea monster seemed to mock their overestimation of their own abilities. It raised its giant claw again, preparing to launch a more ferocious attack. Stand down. Just then, Hephaestus's calm voice rang out. The 3 giants immediately retreated respectfully behind him. Hephaestus looked at the rampant abyssal creation before him, showing no panic, but rather a cold smile filled with analytical interest. Perfect material. He whispered softly. The next second, he raised his hand and issued an instruction to Lihua behind him. Lihua. I am here, Father God. Connect to the Crucible of Destiny, and transfer all energy to Production Line 1. Instruction confirmed. Data streams flashed across Lihua's eyes. Father God, what is the production target? Hephaestus's gaze locked precisely onto the progenitor of Cetus's indestructible carapace. The corner of his mouth curved into a smile that made the 3 giants feel a chill. The production target is transcending death. Rewind time by a mere few dozen seconds. The scene returns to the moment the massive body of the ancestor of Cetus fully emerged from the water. The 3 Cyclops felt a primal awe and reverence for absolute power, stemming from their very instincts. However, Hephaestus saw a different sight. In his eyes, there was no sea monster, no giant claw, only a nearly perfect dark energy field, composed of pure, finality, law, enveloping its body. He had seen that aura before when he was perusing the Codex. Water of the Styx. At this instant, Hephaestus's divine consciousness transformed into a golden stream of light, instantly sinking into the sea of information at the deepest part of his soul. The mythological scroll of the Olympian Codex unfolded before him with a roar. The entry for the ancestor of Cetus glowed with a crimson light. Its carapace was once thrown by the sea god Poseidon into the deepest part of the underworld, the river Styx, where it soaked for an entire epoch. It was imbued with the attribute of absolute death. Any attack from a living being cannot shake this layer of already dead defense. Just as expected, Hephaestus's thoughts didn't linger. Instead, he followed the keynote of water of the Styx to delve deeper into the underlying laws. Countless ancient secrets about the underworld, about death, and about souls flowed before his eyes. He saw the untouchable void when the deceased souls crossed the river. He saw the absolute, irreversible causality when God swore by the river. He saw the most fundamental form of the concept of death, the termination of an order, the annihilation of energy, an irreversible one-way process. One way. A flash of lightning seemed to strike Hephaestus's mind. Since conventional power cannot reverse this iron rule of finality, then, what if I don't reverse it, but overlay it instead? A crazy and bold idea sprouted in his divine soul. The moment this thought was born, his consciousness, integrated with the Codex, seemed to trigger a supreme switch. For the first time, the Scroll of Destiny, which had always passively recorded his achievements, actively radiated an unprecedented brilliant light. Lines of golden text, composed of pure laws, began to rapidly write, construct, and deduce themselves on the blank scroll. That was not recording, but creation. It was the first time this codex from another world, after achieving perfect resonance with Hephaestus's will, actively deduced for him a brand new, divine artifact of destiny, capable of subverting the existing mythological system. A weapon blueprint, incredibly precise, incredibly complex, filled with the interwoven beauty of death and rebirth, was clearly imprinted in the deepest part of Hephaestus's soul. Divine artifact of destiny conceptual blueprint. Name: Beyond Death. Category: Edict sniping weapon. Core concept: if death cannot be broken, then grant it new life, and then strip it away. By the time Hephaestus's consciousness returned to reality, only an instant had passed in the outside world. Brontes's sound barrier had just been shattered by the black water cannon. Step back. Hephaestus's calm voice rang out. The three giants immediately retreated respectfully behind him. Hephaestus looked at the rampant abyssal creation before him, his face devoid of panic, instead showing a cold, analytical smile. Perfect material. He whispered softly. The next second, he raised his hand and gave an order to Li Hua behind him. Li Hua, I am here, Father God. Connect to the Forge of Destiny, and transfer all energy to Production Line 1. Command confirmed. A stream of data flashed in Li Hua's eyes. Father God, what is the production target? Hephaestus's gaze precisely locked onto the indestructible carapace of the ancestor of Cetus. A curve appeared at the corner of his mouth, a curve that made even the three giants feel a chill. Production target: Beyond Death. Boom. Under Li Hua's control, the Forge of Destiny began to operate at an unprecedented power. On Production Line 1, all conventional molds were instantly cleared. A piece of underworld cold iron, personally selected by Hephaestus and imbued with the attribute of annihilation, was thrown into the smelting pool. Enveloped by the purest creative fire, the cold iron was rapidly shaped. It was not a knife, nor a sword, but a peculiar tubular weapon, long and cold, possessing a beauty the three Cyclops had never seen before. It had a gun body over 2 meters long, inscribed with countless light-absorbing runes. A complex scope, seemingly composed of countless crystal lenses, was mounted on the gun body. The entire form of the weapon exuded a sense of awe-inspiring order, belonging to death. In just a few breaths, the form of Beyond Death was forged. Hephaestus reached out his hand and placed it on the newly created weapon. He poured the conceptual blueprint, personally written for him by the Scroll of Destiny, from the depths of his soul into it without reservation. Buzz. The entire sniping weapon let out a low hum, as if a god of death, dormant for billions of years, had been given a soul and was slowly awakening. But this was not enough. Facing this giant beast blessed by the Styx, ordinary bullets were meaningless. Hephaestus extended his other hand. A wisp of extremely pure, golden creative fire, containing the essence of his own divine soul, slowly burned in his palm. Since the carapace is dead, then use life to awaken it. The golden divine fire, under his will, was continuously compressed, purified, and refined. Finally, it transformed into a thumb-sized bullet, flowing with brilliant golden light, pulsating slightly like a heart, a life bullet. Hephaestus picked up this special bullet and slowly pushed it into the cold chamber of Beyond Death. Click. A soft sound. The concepts of life and death, at this moment, were perfectly locked together. In my name, I command. Hephaestus raised this god-slaying sniping weapon and, with a cold voice, bestowed upon it its ultimate authority. Fugue concept overlay. Effect. Upon hitting the target, it will forcibly overwrite its original attributes with new laws. And what Hephaestus had to do was to overlay death with life, and at the moment it came alive, to kill it again. Just then, the ancestor of Cetus's second attack descended. It raised its giant claw again, and this time, the claw was wrapped in an even denser abyssal curse, slamming down fiercely towards the three giants. Hephaestus moved. He slowly raised the Beyond Death in his hand. He looked at the behemoth before him through the divine scope composed of countless crystal lenses. In his vision, the massive physical form of the sea monster disappeared. In its place was a chaotic energy collective, composed of pure, malice, and hunger. And within this chaotic energy collective, there was a point, a core node located at the intersection of its head and chest, emitting the deepest, most condensed darkness. That was where Poseidon's will imprint, used to control this war weapon, resided. It was the phylactery of this giant beast. Hephaestus's lips curved into a cold arc. He pulled the trigger. Bang! An almost imperceptible soft sound. The golden life bullet transformed into a stream of light invisible to the naked eye, silently tearing through space. The next second, it accurately struck the core phylactery that Hephaestus had locked onto. A strange scene unfolded. A golden halo, like a stone thrown into a lake, rapidly spread out from the point of impact. The physical form of the dark carapace in that area did not change, it still looked like abyssal black iron. However, all the curses of the Styx upon it, under the illumination of the golden light, extinguished instantly, like ice and snow melting in the sun. A concept of life was forcibly overlaid. The carapace, at this moment, came alive. And at this very instant, the true power of beyond death activated. Whoosh! A piercing whistle, sharp enough to tear the soul, rang out. After completing its task of conceptual overlay, the tiny bullet, containing Hephaestus's purest destructive divine power, combined with the kinetic energy granted by beyond death, erupted with a roar. It did not explode, but rather, carrying an unparalleled penetrating force and a brilliant golden tail flame, it instantly pierced through that now fragile carapace. PFF'd. The golden stream of light shot in through the ancestor of Cetus's chest and out through its thick back, leaving behind a perfectly circular hole with incredibly smooth edges, as if cut by a divine scalpel. The brilliant divine fire burned fiercely at the edges of the hole, frantically devouring the vitality that had just been born within it. The ancestor of Cetus's cursed water cannon, about to be spewed out, abruptly stopped in its mouth. Its colossal body, large enough to obscure the sky, suddenly stiffened. Its hundreds of crimson eyes, previously filled with tyranny and hunger, at this moment, all their light, like candles being snuffed out, rapidly dimmed, one after another. The imprint of will left by Poseidon was completely erased by this single shot. It died. Not a physical death, but a conceptual, true annihilation. The gigantic, mountain-like body, having lost all support from its will, began to slowly, silently, tip towards the deep sea. Rumble. Only when its corpse had fully sunk into the sea did it unleash a belated, towering tsunami-inducing wave. The abyssal creation, with its pierced, cold corpse, sent the clearest signal to its master. Your war weapon is vulnerable, vulnerable. At the huge chasm in the volcanic kingdom, icy seawater continued to slowly pour in. The carcass of the colossal creature, like a floating, black island of death, lay silently across the near shore, silently recounting the terror of the battle that had just taken place. The air was filled with a rich, strange scent, a mixture of salty seawater and ominous blood. The three Cyclops stood behind Hephaestus, looking at the massive corpse, their huge single eyes still showing lingering shock. They had witnessed a myth. Their king, in a way they could not comprehend yet had to submit to, announced the rise of the volcanic kingdom to the entire world. Brontes. Hephaestus's voice broke the post-battle silence. Secure its body to the shore with strong chains. Do not let it sink, nor let it drift away. Yes, my lord. Brontes took his leave. Hephaestus looked at the corpse, a cold smile flashing in his eyes. To kill it, the most useful Styx shell had been personally destroyed by him. The remaining part was not very useful for forging, it could only be used as research material. However, Hephaestus had other plans. He intended to turn this carcass into the first, and most shocking, living advertisement for his volcanic kingdom since its founding. He took out the resonance stone, which corresponded to Hermes, from his Y. A wisp of divine thought was injected into it. My ally. I have some fresh, piping hot exclusive news here. Are you interested? Oh. Hermes's light and cunning voice replied almost instantly. For you, a busy man, to contact me personally, it must not be a small matter. Tell me, what spectacle is unfolding now? Hephaestus concisely conveyed everything that had just happened through divine thought. He only described the monster's form, power, and the shell tempered by the waters of the Styx, without mentioning the name, ancestor of Cetus. On the other end of the resonance stone, there was a rare silence that lasted for several seconds. A shell tempered by the waters of the Styx. For the first time, Hermes's voice carried a hint of genuine solemnity and suspicion. Such a lavish display, and it just so happens after you've offended the ocean. Hey, besides that ill-tempered sea king, I can't think of a second divine chosen. He had guessed it, after all. Hephaestus was not surprised. As the hub of information, Hermes possessed this level of deductive ability. You directly countered one of Poseidon's probes. Hermes' voice was filled with incredulous excitement. And you won. I was merely acting in self-defense. Hephaestus's tone was as calm as if he were discussing a trivial matter. Hephaestus then stated his true purpose for contacting Hermes. Now, I need you to help me tell this self-defense story to everyone who should hear it. Hermes instantly grasped Hephaestus's intention, his voice filled with the excitement of a businessman discovering a huge opportunity. How do you want to tell it? First, Hephaestus slowly said, proclaim to the three realms that Hephaestus, lord of Mount Etna and god of craftsmen, has successfully slain an ancient sea monster from the abyss. Second, emphasize the significance of this act, not to flaunt power, but to protect the peace and tranquility of the Sicilian seas. Third, and most importantly, Hephaestus paused, his voice becoming meaningful. Throughout the story, the name, Poseidon, must never be mentioned. Just say that this sea monster was, of unknown origin, an, out-of-control ancient beast, that threatened the order of Olympus. On the other end, Hermes couldn't help but let out a soft chuckle. He understood completely. This was no mere news release. This was clearly a silent declaration of war delivered to the Sea King. Not naming him was a final gesture of respect. But defining the sea monster as an out-of-control ancient beast was subtly accusing Poseidon of being unable to control his own pet, allowing it to threaten the territories of Olympus. This was a silent judgment from a moral high ground. Brilliant. Truly brilliant. Hermes exclaimed, you're putting him on the hot seat. If he admits it, he's openly disrupting peace. If he doesn't, he can only swallow this bitter pill and watch you step on his face to gain fame throughout the world. I need a fourth point, Hephaestus added. Please, go on. Let all individuals in the three realms who have a need for items know, whether they are gods, nymphs, or spirits and creatures of the mountains and forests. Whether centaurs crave a perfectly balanced arrow, satyrs desire a ethereal-sounding reed pipe, or tree nymphs wish for an ornament that reflects the moonlight in the forest. As long as they can pay a sufficient price, the flames of my Mount Etna can satisfy their every need. And the corpse of that sea monster is the best proof of my product quality. Ha 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 ha. Hermes finally burst into laughter. Good. What a hero and more. You intend to turn all intelligent beings not of the Olympian pantheon into your potential customers. You're not just the god of craftsmen, you're becoming the god of creation. I love this plan. Don't worry, my ally. This cognitive warfare, targeting all strata of the mythical world, is in my hands. I will customize story versions best suited to different audiences, guaranteeing that your volcanic kingdom will become a sacred place in everyone's hearts, representing highest quality and infinite possibilities. Hermes' figure transformed into a golden light and vanished from the spot. An information storm, spearheaded by him and sweeping across the entire mythical world, thus began. At the Olympian temple, Hermes, with a serious expression, reported the matter to King Zeus. In his account, the story went like this. Father God, your son Hephaestus diligently performed his duties during the establishment of his workshop on Mount Etna. However, an ancient beast of unknown origin suddenly attacked from the deep sea, seemingly intending to destroy that future artifact forging center and challenge your authority. Hephaestus, undaunted, used a newly developed artifact to kill it in one fell swoop, successfully defending the territory and glory of Olympus. This version portrayed Hephaestus as a loyal, capable, and meritorious pioneer who eliminated potential threats to Zeus's rule. By the sacred spring where the nymphs gathered. Hermes, meanwhile, adopted a mysterious and admiring expression, telling another version to the flower-controlling nymphs. Have you heard? That exiled god of craftsmen, he guards a lonely volcano, yet possesses a heart hotter than the sun. When the shadows of the abyss enveloped the land, it was he who, with a beam of light that pierced the eternal night, shattered that ancient nightmare. What he guarded was not just an island, but the peace of all the weak. This version, full of heroism and hazy romance, was enough to spark endless curiosity and imagination in these simple-minded goddesses about the lonely guardian. Deep in the Arcadian mountains and forests, at a wild party of satyrs and centaurs, Hermes, transformed into a tipsy satyr, was gesticulating wildly, bragging to his companions about an astonishing sight. Hick! I'm telling you, that smoking mountain to the west, a real god lives there. I saw it with my own eyes. A sea monster bigger than Uranus was, right through by him. The scene, tisk tisk. This visually impactful story quickly became the hottest topic among all forest creatures. And this was just the beginning. Soon, the satyr's story spawned countless new versions. In the centaur tribes, wise ones began to speak of the metal flowing from Mount Etna possessing the wisdom of the stars, and arrows forged from it could follow the trajectory of fate. Among the whispers of the forest nymphs, legends began to circulate about the heart of the volcano, gem, said to seal an eternal flame that could grant its wearer a radiance comparable to that of a god. Even the most remote mountain spirits whispered that the god of the volcano could forge them eternal lights from lava, illuminating the darkest caves. From the most powerful god-slaying weapons to the most basic daily necessities. Made in Mount Etna, under Hermes's careful guidance, was rapidly becoming synonymous with miracle, quality, and omnipotence. For the first time, the name Hephaestus was no longer associated with words like lame, abandoned, or ugly. Instead, it was linked to powerful, mysterious, wealthy, and order. And at the center of this information storm sweeping through the three realms. In the endless deep sea, in the desolate temple of the sea god. Poseidon sat on his throne, gripping the trident that symbolized his divine authority over the ocean, veins bulging on the back of his hand. He had heard all versions of the story. But in none of them was his name mentioned. This silent disregard from the entire world angered and humiliated him more than any direct, malicious accusation. The only good news was that he knew who that presumptuous new god was. That cripple, not only had he accepted his declaration of war unharmed. He had also torn that declaration to shreds, then stepped on his face, proclaiming his victory to the entire world. What disturbed him most was that the other party had not stepped out of that volcano once, from beginning to end. The ripples of the information storm continued to slowly spread throughout the three realms. And one of the creators of that storm, Hephaestus, stood before the steadily beating heart of the Forge of Destiny, contemplating how to reward his ally. Hermes's contribution was beyond doubt. He not only completed the mission but did so in an unimaginably artistic way, executing this cognitive warfare perfectly. Hephaestus would not be stingy with such a perfect partner. Lihua. I'm here, Father God. Retrieve Hermes's divine parameter and divine authority trajectory. Data loaded. A golden light flashed in Lihua's eyes, and a complex humanoid model composed of countless data streams appeared before Hephaestus. It precisely marked every node of Hermes's divine power, as well as the intrinsic logic of his authorities as divine messenger, traveler, and thief. Lihua's intelligence was essentially a wisp of Hephaestus's divine soul, so Hephaestus could easily communicate with her on a soul level. Based on this, Hephaestus input most of the information from the mythological scrolls into Lihua's database, allowing Lihua to query it much faster than Hephaestus could slowly search in the depths of his own soul. His core is speed and transcendence. Hephaestus hit the nail on the head. The swift feather is just an entry-level work. What I want to forge for him is a true divine artifact capable of bearing all his authorities. Golden divine fire ignited in his palm. This time, Hephaestus did not let the Cyclops intervene. He was challenging a completely new domain, double fugue. To simultaneously engrave two completely different conceptual laws onto a single divine artifact. This was the ultimate test of the god of craftsmanship's control. First, the winged sandals. Under Lihua's control, the Forge of Destiny precisely spat out a liquid mithril that fused wind crystal and spatial primordial stone. Hephaestus's divine sense, like the most precise carving knife, constructed within the liquid a complex circuit that he had rehearsed countless times in his mind, capable of real-time analysis of spatial laws. Shaping, complete. A pair of new sandals, more brilliant than starlight and lighter than wings, floated in midair. The real challenge was just beginning. Just as Hephaestus focused on the fugue, two powerful and noble divine power auras descended without warning at the entrance of the volcanic kingdom. One, as hot and dazzling as the sun, full of art and majesty. The other, as cold and aloof as moonlight, carrying the tranquility and killing intent of the wilderness. Father God, based on the detected divine power reactions and comparison with the database, it is determined to be the sun god Apollo and the moon goddess Artemis. Hephaestus's movements paused slightly, then a knowing smile played on his lips. Tell the giants not to panic. Guests have arrived. Lihua, please invite the two majesties in. A moment later, Apollo, the god of light, and Artemis, the goddess of the hunt, the most famous twins in mythology, walked side by side into the workshop. However, when Apollo saw the tall, composed black-haired youth on the throne, for the first time, an unconcealed shock appeared on his incomparably handsome face. Hephaestus. He blurted out, his golden eyes filled with disbelief. Your body, your divine power. As one of the top main gods of Olympus, he knew better than anyone that a deity's appearance was directly linked to the strength of their divine power and their mastery of authority. The last time they met, the other party was just a budding child who needed cleverness to protect himself. But now, the profound divine might emanating from him was no less than his own. A deity's appearance is the most intuitive manifestation of their inner divine power and mastery of authority. Hephaestus's current form clearly declared to him, his power was already enough to stand on equal footing with these well-established second-generation gods. Perhaps, even surpassing them. This was beyond the scope of talent, this was simply a miracle. It is I, Your Highness Apollo. Hephaestus nodded calmly, as if he hadn't seen the turbulent waves in the other's eyes. A god's appearance represents the amount of divine power and the degree of mastery over authority. Apollo murmured, his gaze at Hephaestus like looking at an incomprehensible monster. Your current form is already enough to rival any god outside the three Olympian brothers. Perhaps I am just exceptionally gifted, Hephaestus smiled faintly, just like our newly appointed divine messenger, Hermes. These words, like a needle, precisely pierced Apollo's arrogant heart. Hermes, that young god who had just been born, stole his cattle at birth and later gained the authority of a divine messenger. And this equally nascent god of craftsmanship had grown to his equal in an inconceivable speed. For the first time, Apollo felt a strong sense of crisis, of being left behind by the tide of the times. The newly born gods were one more powerful than the last. Perhaps he was truly falling behind. This sense of crisis made him even more eager for the purpose of his visit. Compared to her brother's shock, Artemis appeared more pragmatic. Her eyes, like the cold moonlight, calmly surveyed the powerful steel kingdom and the carcass of the sea monster still exuding a terrifying aura, floating by the shore. We have heard of your deeds. She spoke directly, her voice cold, without a hint of superfluous emotion. We need weapons, the best weapons. I guessed as much. Hephaestus's face showed a smile that said, I have been waiting for a long time. He had already foreseen this event in the mythological scrolls. He extended his hand, not to display any physical objects, but to construct in the air, with pure divine power, two translucent weapon templates glowing with the radiance of laws. One was a magnificent longbow burning with golden flames. The other was an ancient hunting bow flowing with silver moonlight. For your Highness Apollo, the sun god, I name it, Solar Flare. Hephaestus pointed to the golden longbow, introducing it with a seductive voice. Its arrows will no longer be any physical entity, but will be condensed from the purest law of light, within your own divine power. Drawing the bowstring is creation. Releasing the bowstring is destruction. You can even, according to your will, attach the concept of plague or healing to each light arrow, perfectly fitting your divinity. Apollo's breathing instantly became rapid. His gaze was fixed on the template, as if he saw the ultimate form of his art and divine authority. Hephaestus then turned to the moon goddess. And for you, your Highness Artemis, the goddess of the hunt, is this one, moonstring. Its arrows will be absolutely silent moonlight, shot out soundlessly, without breath, without form, capable of penetrating all shadows and illusions in the world. Similarly, it can also be imbued with your divinity. It can either pacify all beasts, making them subservient, or enrage them, making them tear apart all your enemies. For the first time, a clear stir of emotion appeared on Artemis's perpetually frozen face. This was precisely the most perfect hunting bow she had always dreamed of. I accept this design. I want it too. The two deities spoke almost in unison. However, the moment their voices fell, Hephaestus smiled and waved his hand. The two weapon templates in midair vanished instantly like a dream bubble. Apollo's longing face froze, then he frowned. What do you mean by this? The meaning is simple, your highnesses. Hephaestus's face showed the amiable smile of a merchant. The templates are merely to prove that I have the ability to fulfill your needs. But to turn them into reality, some things are still needed. First, the materials. He looked at Apollo. For example, a wisp of undying true fire from the sun's core. He then looked at Artemis. And a handful of eternal silent moonlight settled in the deepest, coldest craters on the far side of the moon. These, you two will need to obtain yourselves. Apollo and Artemis exchanged glances and nodded. This was a reasonable request. The most supreme divine artifacts naturally required the most supreme materials. Of course, materials are merely the requirements for the items themselves. Hephaestus's tone shifted, finally revealing his true intentions. And my craftsmanship fee, Hephaestus, needs to be calculated separately. I do not need any treasures. He held up a finger. My craftsmanship fee is that you two each owe me a promise. One day in the future, when I have a need, help me do something within your power. Furthermore, he looked at Apollo, a shrewd glint in his eyes. Your Highness Apollo, god of prophecy, you will need to pay me one additional thing. One prophecy about the future, without reservation. The demand for a prophecy from Apollo was not a spur-of-the-moment decision by Hephaestus. It was a crucial chess piece he had placed after careful consideration for his future path. Admittedly, he possessed the Olympus Codex, the omniscient script of destiny. But he knew better than anyone that a script is static. While he, and the world he was influencing, were alive. A butterfly flapping its wings in a distant land could potentially stir up a storm on the other side of the world. But he, this butterfly, that had intruded into the world of myth, had stirred up far more than just a storm. He had rewritten his own birth, forged alliances that shouldn't exist, slain Poseidon's weapon of war, and created the self-aware Lihua. Every single thing he did was enough to cause the trajectory of fate to deviate dramatically. Yet, the strange thing was that, until this moment, the great river of history still stubbornly flowed forward along the riverbed already recorded in the myth scroll. It was as if all his efforts were merely stones tossed onto a calm lake, causing ripples but ultimately unable to change the inherent direction of the water's flow. He had two theories regarding this. The first was that he was incredibly lucky, and all the changes he had made happened to fall within the elastic range of fate, meaning their chain reactions were insufficient to cause a qualitative shift in history. The second theory was grander and far more awe-inspiring. It suggested that above all the gods, there existed a more ancient, fundamental, and inscrutable will. It functioned like the universe's self-correction mechanism. It allowed for minor adjustments but absolutely forbade the main narrative from deviating from its predetermined track. Probability-wise, Hephaestus leaned toward the second conclusion. But that doesn't mean I am powerless. His eyes became profoundly deep. Since the table cannot be overturned, I will be the player who utilizes the rules to win all the chips. The major direction remaining unchanged meant that the critical events recorded in the myth scroll, such as the creation of humanity, Prometheus stealing fire, and the future Trojan War, would still unfold as scheduled. This was his greatest advantage. He could plan ahead, precisely intervene in every event, and secure the maximum benefit for himself within the fixed framework. Apollo's prophecy, therefore, was the compass he would use to calibrate his course. It was necessary to verify exactly where his butterfly influence was leading the storm. The future is fluid, and the script requires real-time correction. Hephaestus made up his mind. He slowly pulled back his thoughts and focused his gaze once more on the conflicted twin gods before him. A flicker of hesitation crossed Apollo's golden eyes. A look of caution also appeared on the cool, clear face of Artemis. A single promise. This condition was too vague and too broad. They were Olympian sovereigns. The weight of a single promise from them was enough to alter the course of a war or even determine the rise and fall of another god. No one could guarantee what this deep-thinking god of the forge might ask them to do in the future. Seeing the two gods struggling with the decision, Hephaestus offered another benevolent smile. As if understanding their plight, he proposed an amendment. If the two of you find this difficult, how about I grant you the right to refuse? At this, Apollo's brow visibly relaxed. Artemis's gaze also softened slightly. The right to refuse. This clause undoubtedly reduced the risk to the absolute minimum. If Hephaestus's future request was too outrageous, they could simply decline without incurring the stain of breaking an oath. Apollo was about to agree. However, Hephaestus's unhurried voice sounded again. If the two of you have the right to refuse my future request, then I, too, shall have the right to refuse the forging of these two bows today. The expressions of the twin gods instantly froze. Do the two of you still not understand? The smile slowly disappeared from Hephaestus's face, replaced by the equal and unquestionable bearing of a sovereign. The aura of the king of the volcano was fully revealed in that moment. What I am offering you is essentially a promise, that when you are in need, I will do something within my power to assist you. The price I am asking from you is also something within your power. It is simply that I am well aware that the task you require of me is the forging of these bows. Or perhaps you would prefer not to have these two bows, and require me to do something else. Hephaestus laid his cards on the table. He was not the ostracized, crippled blacksmith who needed to rely on their favor to survive. He was the lord of Mount Etna, a king who held core technology and was fully capable of standing as their equal. This is a fair transaction between gods, free of any loopholes or traps. Hephaestus delivered the final word. Apollo and Artemis fell into a long silence. They finally understood. The other party had left them absolutely no room for negotiation. The right to refuse was nothing more than a sharp verbal barb designed to pierce the last thread of hope they held for an easy bargain. In the end, it was the more pragmatic Artemis who broke the silence first. I agree to your condition. Her voice was still cool, but it carried a hint of acknowledgement for a true powerhouse. Seeing this, Apollo could only sigh helplessly and nod. Fine, Hephaestus, you win. But I warn you, the divine bows you forge for us had better be exactly like the model you showed us. They will only be better. Hephaestus's face once again displayed the benevolent smile of a victor. Then I shall await your return, bringing the indestructible true fire, and the eternal lunar radiance. Oh, and Lord Apollo, your prophecy can also be exchanged for an interesting little trinket from me. I am always fair in my dealings. Having seen off the twin gods, who harbored different thoughts, the empty workshop returned to silence. The sharp light in Hephaestus's eyes gradually receded. This transaction with Apollo was merely a convenient step in his grand future blueprint. Now, his thoughts returned to his original plan. It was time to initiate a complete and comprehensive equipment upgrade for his highly deserving ally, the one who traversed the three realms. Hephaestus picked up the new pair of winged sandals, his thoughts flowing as he considered what kind of enchantment would best suit Hermes' divine authority. An idea gradually surfaced in his mind. For Hermes, the messenger who crossed all three realms, speed was certainly necessary. But direction was even more crucial. Otherwise, no matter how fast he was, it would be useless. Hephaestus recalled the experience of his first trip with Hermes. He smiled and shook his head. I think I'll add a navigation system for this ally. For Hephaestus, crafting equipment for an ally was more than just a favor, it was an exploration of the limits of his own craftsmanship. After seeing off the two twin gods, each with their own thoughts, he was finally able to focus on a new field, the double fugue. The so-called fugue was not a miracle born from a wish. It was the final process where a craftsman, using their profound understanding of the world's laws as a chisel, and their own abilities and skills, transformed these laws into a complete and logical design blueprint, forcefully imprinting it upon their creation. The primary prerequisite was that, before commencing work, a perfectly self-consistent design must exist in their mind. For example, a complete energy flow mechanism, a transformation model, and its interaction logic with the user. The more perfect the design, the more powerful and stable the effect of the fugue. It wasn't just a simple thought like, I want it to be faster, that could achieve this. Imagining things out of thin air was the prerogative of God. And in this world, there was no God. What existed here were craftsmen who, within the existing rules, reassembled matter and laws into their most perfect and incredible forms. Hephaestus, as the god of craftsmen, had his greatest advantage in the final step of implementing a design, an almost instinctive success rate that other beings found difficult to match. This time, he was going to imprint two completely different, even contradictory, conceptual laws onto the same divine artifact simultaneously. This was the ultimate test of the god of craftsmen's control. Hephaestus extended his right hand, covering the brand new sandals. Its core was no longer merely speed, but precision and trace elimination. The golden divine flame gently seeped into them, beginning the first fugue. Fugue. Beacon of all realms. Buzz. The sandals trembled slightly, and their internal spatial circuits were instantly activated, as if coming to life, actively and greedily absorbing the scattered law information from the surrounding space. Hephaestus's mind instantly conjured the scene of this fugue being activated. When Hermes wished to travel to a destination, these sandals would automatically analyze spatial laws and provide him with 3 optimized paths in his divine consciousness. First, the fastest absolute speed path. It would tear through space and traverse dangerous alternate dimensions, achieving the most efficient arrival. Second, the lowest energy consumption path. It would seek out the most stable real space routes, like a sailboat with the wind, saving the most divine power for long journeys. Third, the highest stealth path. It would plan a route that bypassed all known detection spells and divine domains, making him like an undetected ghost. This was a divine navigation system, tailor-made for Hermes's identity as a divine messenger and traveler, which would completely resolve the predicament of his random teleportation when he first gained divine authority. In fact, these were 3 pre-set calculation methods by Hephaestus. If needed, Hermes could also customize the algorithm to set up various more detailed planning methods. Immediately after, Hephaestus extended his left hand. Unlike the divine flame at his right fingertips, filled with the aura of creation and construction, the flame burning at his left fingertips was a deep, dark divine flame that seemed capable of devouring everything, symbolizing end and erasure. He placed this finger on another node of the sandals. Fugue. Silent corridor. 2 different laws violently collided on the small sandals, yet they were forcefully blended together by Hephaestus's terrifying control, achieving a perfect, opposing unity. Hephaestus could clearly perceive its function. It could be actively activated when Hermes moved. Once activated, it would create a special path where no traces of space, sound, scent, divine power, or anything else would be left behind. However, this silent corridor could only be maintained for an extremely short time, returning to normal in moments, which perfectly suited Hermes's swift nature. The combination of these 2 points was enough to make any pursuer lose their trail. This was the ultimate enhancement of the god of thieves' divinity, allowing him to truly come without a shadow, leave without a trace. Beacon of all realms was establishing a path, and silent corridor was erasing a path. Hephaestus looked at this masterpiece he had personally completed, containing seemingly contradictory laws, and nodded in satisfaction. From now on, your name shall be Realm Walker. But this was only the beginning. Hephaestus's gaze shifted to the other workbench. He was going to equip Hermes with a matching helmet. The anvil of destiny churned again, this time spitting out a special alloy fused with starlight sand and tranquil obsidian. The shaping was also done in one smooth motion. A winged helmet, simple and ancient in design, yet seemingly containing the entire night sky, floated quietly. Its core was information processing and value judgment. Hephaestus extended his right hand again, touching its brow. Fugue. Veil of thought. An invisible, absolute barrier composed of countless mental runes formed within the helmet. It would provide the wearer with an absolute divine sense, firewall, shielding against all detection, prophecy, and mind-reading spells targeting Hermes, allowing him to conceal his truest thoughts even in front of Zeus or Apollo, theoretically. This was inward protection. Next, Hephaestus's left hand touched the helmet's wings. Fugue. Scales of value. 2 incredibly precise, illusory scales made of light instantly appeared on the helmet's wings. When Hermes observed any item, creature, or even an event, he could actively activate this ability. The helmet would automatically analyze the target and present him with streams of information, inferred from data and interwoven with cause and effect and destiny, in his divine consciousness. This was the target's value. First, basic value, including materials, rarity, and current power level. Second, potential value, including future growth, usability, and possible subsequent events. Third, relational value, including its connections to other key figures and events, and its position in the current power structure. The criteria for measurement came from a model Hephaestus had summarized from the Mythology scroll. Hermes could also customize its content. This was outward insight. This was the ultimate empowerment of his divinity as the god of commerce and god of thieves, a pair of appraisal eyes that saw through the essence of all things. One for concealment, one for observation, both offensive and defensive, perfectly unified, the ultimate embodiment of information warfare. Your name shall be all-encompassing vision. When the two divine artifacts were simultaneously forged, they emitted a harmonious resonance in midair. Hephaestus could clearly feel that a qualitative change, far greater than 1 plus 1, had occurred between them. A brand new Hermes was about to emerge because of this friendship beyond fate. He could first use all-encompassing vision to discern the most valuable targets within the three realms, whether it was a treasure forgotten in the deep sea or a piece of intelligence leaked during a conversation among gods, capable of changing the tide of battle. Then, he could put on Realm Walker, plan the most secret and fastest route, and infiltrate the target location. During the operation, he could activate Silent Corridor to erase all traces, quietly going and returning. From the acquisition of intelligence to the planning of the route, to the execution of the action and the final disappearance without a trace. A perfect closed loop. This was no longer merely a divine messenger and a thief. This was a special agent, moving in the shadows of the mythical world, equipped with the most top-tier gear. Hephaestus looked at his work with satisfaction and picked up the resonance stone belonging to his ally. My ally. There was a hint of a smile in his voice. Your new toys are ready. Come and pick them up. Inside the core control room of the Volcano Kingdom, the massive optical screen interface smoothly displayed the operational data of the Forge of Destiny. Several critical material reserve bars had turned from a healthy green to a glaring red, indicating severe shortages. Space Primordial Stone, reserves critical. Oblivion Cold Iron, reserves critical. Starlight Sand, reserves depleted. These were the core materials consumed in forging Hermes' two divine artifacts, Double Fugue, and the previous, Beyond Death, weapon. The birth of a divine artifact was never cheap. Each act of defying fate and creation was backed by the accumulation of vast quantities of rare resources. Hephaestus, in order to arm his key ally and achieve a decisive victory in the deep-sea crisis, had almost depleted the Cyclops' millennia-old reserves. Father God, according to the current production sequence, the reserves of basic bronze and obsidian are still sufficient. Li Hua's voice rang out, with her usual calmness. However, if we are to undertake divine artifact level creation again, our high-end material reserves are insufficient to support the birth of even a single piece. Hephaestus nodded slightly, unsurprised by this. Materials did not appear out of thin air. The functions of the Forge of Destiny are approaching perfection in its first phase. Hephaestus looked at the smoothly operating automated production line on the optical screen. The Forge of Destiny could now process the roughest, most primitive ores and other materials into first-level products, such as basic metal ingots. It could also proportionally combine and assemble different first-level products to create second-level products with special properties. This process could continue, producing third-level, fourth-level products, and so on, without an upper limit as long as needed. Then, under Li Hua's control, the Forge of Destiny could execute set or issued commands, combining products of different levels for automated, assembly line production, yielding the final products. But the problem still remained. Currently, the furnaces, feeding, still relies on the most primitive manual labor. Whether it was the wrath crystals, used as fuel or the various ores and other materials used as basic ingredients, Brontes and his team had to personally excavate them from the depths of the volcano, then carry them on their shoulders and backs to the feeding port. This was too slow. And it wasted too much of these three top craftsmen's time. The next step is to perfect automated mineral collection and rapid energy acquisition. Hephaestus intended to establish a truly efficient, automated, ore vein mining network, and energy extraction system, within the body of the volcano. Just then, a light and somewhat playful voice, without warning, sounded behind him. My dear god of crafts, the commotion in your place is much louder than the snores of those old fellows in the Tartarus abyss. Hephaestus did not turn around, nor did he show any surprise. He simply smiled and closed the operating interface in front of him. It seems my new doorbell isn't perfect enough. It failed to give an early warning of a thief's quiet visit. Hermes' figure leisurely emerged from the shadow of a pillar. He leaned against the pillar, his cunning, agile eyes curiously surveying the magnificent workshop, filled with the beauty of steel and fire, without showing excessive astonishment at the spectacular performance of the Forge of Destiny. His gaze was more one of scrutiny and evaluation, judging the value of the forge, analyzing its operational logic, and considering how much profit it could bring to his ally. This was truly a qualified god of commerce. Honestly, Hermes shrugged, I just snuck into Poseidon's temple, and the atmosphere there was 10,000 times colder than the temperature in your forge. It seems our signboard is working well. Hephaestus turned around, looking at him calmly. More than just well. Hermes grinned, his eyes sparkling with excitement. That king of the sea is probably dreaming of extinguishing your volcano right now. However, before he finds a way, I think you should first look at the good news I've brought you. With that, Hermes flipped his wrist, and a small vortex enveloped in divine power appeared in his palm, from which various noisy sounds emanated. The Centaur Archer tribe has pre-ordered 300 windbreaker arrows. The nymphs of Moonlight Forest want 100 moonlight hand mirrors that can reflect true souls. Oh, and this is the most interesting one. Charon, the ferryman of the underworld, wants you to custom make an undecaying soul ferryboat, and the reward is 3 stones of Lethe. Countless orders, like snowflakes, converged from all corners of the 3 realms. The Volcano Kingdom had already made a name for itself. These will all take time. Hephaestus nodded. However, before you become a qualified sales director, I think you should first look at your employee benefits. Hephaestus noticed a clear look of confusion in Hermes's eyes and quickly corrected himself. I mean, before you become a qualified chief messenger, you should first look at the reward you deserve. Then, he raised his hand, and the pair of realm walkers and the Omnivision helm slowly floated up from the workbench, suspending themselves before Hermes. For the first time, the smile on Hermes's face genuinely faded. He didn't immediately reach out to touch them. He simply walked slowly around the 2 divine artifacts, his eyes, like the most discerning connoisseur, scrutinizing every wisp of divine light flowing upon them, deciphering the patterns of laws contained within. After a long moment, he finally extended his hand and gently stroked the light wings of the realm walkers. Beacon of all realms and corridor of silence. He whispered softly, accurately naming the 2 fugues. Hephaestus had previously revealed some information to him through the resonance stone. Creating paths, then erasing paths. Hephaestus, you are a madman. His voice was light, but deep within his cunning eyes, a flame called excitement burned. He unceremoniously put on the sandals and the helmet. Buzz. An unprecedented, powerful sensation, perfectly attuned to his own divinity, instantly flowed through his entire body. All right, now, try to go somewhere. Hephaestus said. For example, the cave on Mount Cylon where you caught the wind, for me. Upon hearing this, Hermes closed his eyes. The next second, the expression on his face shifted from excitement to a hint of shock. In his divine consciousness, 3 incredibly clear path maps, formed by light, automatically appeared. One was labeled, fastest, even cutting through a dangerous chaotic space. One was labeled, energy saving, as smooth as a country road. And one was labeled, secret, perfectly bypassing all possible prying eyes. This is simply. He couldn't find the words to describe it. A navigation system. I don't want you taking me to a satyr party again next time. Hephaestus's tone was filled with deliberate disdain. Hermes turned his head, his gaze falling upon a block of black iron ingot that Argus had just refined, near the warehouse entrance. He tried to activate another function of the Omnivision helm. Buzz. In his vision, a stream of data appeared next to the black iron ingot. Basic value. High-purity volcanic black iron, suitable for forging excellent mortal weapons. Potential value. Contains a trace of the dormant divinity of the Earth Mother Gaia. If irrigated with divine blood, there is an extremely low probability of awakening into a growth-type material with the Earth Guardian attribute. Relational value. This item was refined today by the Cyclops Argus, currently belongs to the Volcano Kingdom's strategic reserves, and is bound to the Forge of Destiny system. Instantly, all the potential value of that ore was analyzed. With these, Hermes turned and looked at Hephaestus, a sincere, allied smile on his face. The entire world will hold no secrets from me. Hephaestus smiled too. Then, my ally. He reopened the operating interface and pulled up the striking, red-highlighted list of material shortages. Before you go uncover the world's secrets, could you do me a small favor first? He crossed off the basic minerals that could be collected near the volcano from the list. What remained were rare divine materials with extremely special origins, some even existing only in legends. Help me inquire where these little trinkets are most abundant in reserves. Hermes looked at the list, the smile at the corner of his mouth growing even more cunning and confident. Reserves. He lightly flicked the brim of the Omnivision helm, a flash of all-knowing insight in his eyes. My friend, you should ask where their guard is weakest. Leave it to me. Before his words faded, his figure transformed into an unperceived breeze, dissipating within the workshop. Hermes took away the red-marked list of resource shortages, but also left behind a sweet burden, the avalanche of incoming orders. Hephaestus stood still, his expression calm, showing no anxiety whatsoever over the depletion of materials. In his eyes, this was not a crisis. This was merely a normal version flaw that was bound to be exposed after the system had been running at high speed. And what he was best at was fixing flaws. Lihua. He spoke, his voice echoing in the empty core control room. I am here, Father God. Lihua's figure silently appeared behind him. Summon our three respected giants. I have something to discuss. Understood, Father God. Only after the three Cyclops arrived in the control room did Hephaestus continue speaking. Version 1.0 of the Forge of Destiny has completed its historical mission. Hephaestus's gaze swept across the massive light screen. It proved that our theory is feasible, and it won us our first batch of valuable customers. He pointed to the orders that had arrived from the outside world. However, its underlying architecture still relies too heavily on manpower, meaning ourselves. From energy acquisition to mineral mining, the entire input side of the means of production is still in its most primitive stage. This limits our capacity and wastes our most precious resource, our time. The giants listened quietly, their massive single eyes filled with focus and devotion. Therefore, I have decided. Hephaestus turned around to face his original and most loyal crew. To perform the first major version iteration on the Forge of Destiny. This upgrade will be zero downtime, without interrupting existing production tasks. Updating is not easy. Remember to share 101kanshu.com. First, the energy acquisition system. Hephaestus switched the screen to the three-dimensional structural map of Mount Etna. A red line representing the flow of energy snaked from the deepest part, the sealed location of Typhon, all the way to the core of the forge. Steropus, tell me, what is the greatest difficulty whenever you go to retrieve the crystals of wrath? The named giant replied in a booming voice, My lord, it is the erosion of the dragon's will, and the violent energy backlash when prying the solid crystals from the mineral vein. Very good. Hephaestus nodded. What if we stop transporting solid fuel? He stretched out his hand and drew a completely new design on the structural map. We will establish a pre-purification array directly on the periphery of the dragon's sealed location. Then, using the geosiphon pipeline I designed, we will directly extract the dragon's wrath in its purest energy flow, form and transport it to the core of the forge. We won't transport solid coal anymore, we'll directly transport liquefied coal. The three giants only half understood this metaphor from another world, but the data stream in Lihua's eyes instantly completed tens of thousands of feasibility simulations for the entire plan. Father God, the plan is theoretically feasible, with a success rate of 99.9%. Then the remaining 0.1% will be covered by our skill. Hephaestus looked at the three giants. This project requires the three of you to work together to excavate, lay the pipelines, and inscribe the arrays. Are there any issues? None, my lord. Burning fighting spirit ignited in the Cyclops' single eyes. Very good. Now for the second update. Hephaestus switched the display to the intricate mineral vein distribution map of the volcanic realm. The Mineral Extraction Network. Argas, you are in charge of smelting ore. You know best how many basic minerals we consume daily. Yes, my lord, it is an astronomical figure. And the way you mine with giant hammers and transport on your shoulders is like trying to drain an ocean with a spoon. Hephaestus's voice was calm, yet it pointed out the core issue of efficiency. He stretched out his hand again. Golden divine fire ignited in his palm. A piece of the most common black iron ingot was tossed into it. Supported by the precise data models provided by Lihua, Hephaestus's divine consciousness, like the most precise micro-engraving knife, began constructing an incredibly complex life structure within the molten iron. Soon, a metal creation, roughly half a meter in size, cast entirely from black iron and resembling a certain type of beetle, was born. It possessed 6 segmented legs as sharp as knives, capable of cutting through the hardest rock. Its mouthpart was a small, ultra-high temperature energy furnace that could directly melt and purify ore. Its back featured a standardized, detachable storage module. This is the prototype for the geovital worker ant. Hephaestus said softly. But having only worker ants is not enough. He increased the output of the divine fire and threw more materials into it. This time, he forged a queen ant that was much larger, 100 times more complex in structure, and filled with a sense of living beauty. Lihua, import all the geological maps and mineral vein information of the volcano into its core. Data transmitting. Transmission complete. Hephaestus gently placed the black iron queen ant on the ground. He extended his finger, touched its brow, and granted it the final special attributes. Fugue. Cluster will and fugue. Infinite replication. Double fugue. Buzz. The black iron queen ant's dull compound eyes instantly lit up with a faint red glow. It received the most fundamental instructions from its creator: mine, refine, transport. Dragging its massive body, it slowly crawled toward the waste disposal port of the Forge of Destiny and began devouring the metal scraps. Moments later, its abdomen began to pulsate rhythmically. 1, 2, 10, one after another, brand new, miniaturized, geovital worker ants were produced from its abdomen. As soon as these worker ants were born, they immediately followed the mineral map in their minds and, in an orderly fashion, crawled toward the nearest mine shaft, beginning their ceaseless work. An automated mineral collection network capable of self-maintenance, self-replication, and self-management was thus born. The 3 Cyclops were completely stunned by the sight. Their king had, once again, created a miracle in a way they could not comprehend. All right, now. Hephaestus clapped his hands, drawing everyone's attention back. While the 2 major systems are being updated, our forge cannot stand idle. He retrieved the simple orders that Hermes had brought. Lihua, connect to production line 1, and begin executing the orders for the Centaur tribe, and the Moonlight Glade. Command received. Planning production sequence. The massive body of the Forge of Destiny once again emitted a deep roar. Giant mechanical arms precisely grabbed the standardized bronze ingots and obsidian from the warehouse. On the other side, some of the toughest feathers collected from the forest were also sent to another processing station. Under Lihua's millisecond-level scheduling, the assembly line began to operate. Cutting, grinding, quenching, enchanting, batches of wind-breaking arrows, with perfectly straight shafts, sharp heads, and even impeccably balanced fletching, were produced. On another production line, specially polished crystals were inlaid into silver frames carved with laurel patterns. Each hand mirror not only reflected the user's appearance but also captured a hint of the purest radiance from the depths of their soul. While the 3 giants were still laying the foundation for the first pipeline of the geosiphon. The first batch of flawless finished products, matching the required quantity and far exceeding customer expectations, were already resting quietly in the finished goods warehouse. Hephaestus watched all of this and nodded in satisfaction. Production and upgrading proceeded in parallel. The old order operated steadily, while the new order quietly came into being. This was the zero downtime update, belonging to the god of craftsmen. While the roar of the volcano was becoming a brand new background sound, symbolizing order and creation, Mount Olympus remained immersed in its eternal symphony. That symphony was interwoven with power, desire, jealousy, and an everlasting political game. Here, every god had their own business to attend to. Hall of the King of Gods. Zeus sat high on his golden throne, his knuckles rhythmically tapping the armrest. At this moment, before him, the divine messenger Hermes had just finished his report on the Mount Etna crisis. Of course, it was a carefully packaged, politically correct version. Therefore, Father God, your son Hephaestus not only successfully defended the territory and glory of Olympus but also demonstrated our unshakable resolve to all potential forces of chaos within the three realms. Hermes's voice still echoed in Zeus's ears, full of cadence and persuasion. Zeus's face showed little emotion, only a subtle hint of satisfaction. A distant, insignificant son had, in an unexpected way, resolved a not-so-small problem and, in doing so, earned honor for Olympus. This was good. It was like a king seeing one of his border fortress commanders win a brilliant battle. He would bestow rewards, and he would remember it. But that was all. Because the king's chessboard was far grander than a mere border fortress. His gaze seemed to pierce through the temple's dome, looking towards the depths of the earth, and even into the darker abyss of Tartarus. There, the resentment of his imprisoned Titan uncles and aunts burned like an unextinguishable dark fire, scorching the very foundations of the world. And his grandmother, the Earth Mother Gaia, also seemed to grow increasingly displeased by the imprisonment of her children. A new tremor, filled with primal rage and chaotic energy, was slowly awakening in the deepest parts of the earth. Prophecies spoke of an enemy even more terrifying than the Titans. How to thoroughly consolidate his hard-won rule, how to appease or even suppress his unpredictable grandmother, and how to prepare for the next potential war that could shake the very foundation of the King of Gods. These were the King of Gods' most urgent priorities on his current agenda. As for that lame son far away at the volcano, he was quite good, a useful tool. So let him remain there, continue to shine and contribute to the arsenal of Olympus. Zeus waved his hand, signaling Hermes to withdraw. His thoughts were already immersed in the contemplation of future wars. Queen's Palace. Hera was facing a magic mirror condensed from the power of stars. The mirror reflected not any specific person or object, but a swirling, ominous chaotic vortex. At the center of the vortex, deep within the earth, countless distorted and massive dark shadows were faintly visible, taking shape. Crack. The golden wine goblet in Hera's hand was unconsciously crushed, forming cracks. Gaia's wrath, the resentment of those imprisoned siblings. Her voice was cold, filled with apprehension. Just then, a nymph goddess serving her carefully reported the heroic deeds of Hephaestus slaying the monstrous beast, which were circulating throughout the three realms. Hera listened, merely frowning in impatience. Hephaestus. That failed creation that brought her shame. That blemish she had personally cast into the abyss. His recent achievements, to her, were not a source of glory but rather a silent, sharp mockery. As if constantly reminding her how foolish and ridiculous her original decision had been. But this small, insignificant annoyance was quickly overshadowed by the deeper threat in the mirror. She had no time to ponder how a son she had long abandoned had managed to turn his fortunes around. All her energy, all her vigilance, was focused on the terrifying shadow emanating from the Earth Mother, a shadow capable of threatening her husband, her family, and the entire rule of Olympus. A conspiracy targeting the entire divine royal system was slowly brewing in places she could not see. As the Queen of Heaven, as the guardian of order, she had to prepare for it. Deep Sea, Temple of the Sea God. In the endless darkness and silence, Poseidon's azure eyes burned with two cold flames of fury. Every word of the rumors spread by Hermes was like a resounding slap, hitting him hard in the face. An ancient beast of unknown origin. Guarding the peace of the Sicilian Sea. His low roar made the entire temple, constructed from the bones of ancient sea beasts, tremble slightly. That cripple, that piece of junk he had never even looked at, discarded by Hera, had not only destroyed his weapon of war but had also turned that victory into a stepping stone, trampling on his face to ascend to the stage of glory. Send another monster. No. The same tactic would not work again. Moreover, it would only make him, the king of the sea, appear even more at his wit's end. Poseidon's anger gradually cooled, transforming into a deeper, more dangerous calculation. Since brute force could not easily destroy the turtle shell-like volcano, then, he would destroy the very source of his livelihood, his craft, his products, his pride. Poseidon's divine consciousness crossed endless ocean trenches, probing into a forbidden archipelago shrouded in poisonous sea mist year-round. The craftsman of Rhodes. The ancient Telchines. His will was calling upon a group of marine craftsmen even older and more evil than the Cyclops. They were born sorcerers and blacksmiths, rumored to have invented metal smelting, but they were also cursed by the gods for their depravity and blasphemy. Come forth, my forgotten servants. I shall bestow upon you inexhaustible deep-sea treasures. With your craft, your sorcery, imitate, surpass, and pollute all the creations of that cripple. He wants to become the arms dealer of the three realms, does he not? Then I shall let the entire world know that his proud flames are worthless before my deep-sea cold iron. A counterfeit and trade war against the volcanic kingdom was quietly being set in motion in the silent depths of the sea. Aphrodite's chambers. On Mount Olympus, within a hidden chamber perpetually shrouded in roses and musk. Aphrodite, the goddess of love, lay languidly on a silken couch, her jade feet bare, allowing Ares, the god of war, to comb her long hair, which cascaded like a golden waterfall. Speaking of which, Ares, she playfully twirled a strand of hair, her tone carrying a hint of casual amusement. Have you heard? That lame son Hera cast away seems to have become quite a formidable figure now. Ares let out a sneer, filled with a warrior's contempt for a craftsman. Just a cripple who only knows how to hide in a cave and play with a forge. No matter how intricate the trinkets he creates, or how many sea monsters he slays, it doesn't change the fact that he can't even stand steadily. His handsome face was full of disdain. True power is the bulging of muscles, the sound of a spear piercing flesh. His victory. HMPH, merely some opportunistic tricks, devoid of any glory. Aphrodite chuckled in agreement. In her opinion, no matter how beautiful the artifacts Hephaestus could create, their origin was ultimately an ugly, imperfect life. Beauty born from ugliness was itself a flaw. You're right, she extended her slender jade finger, hooking Ares's chin. Compared to those clanging iron pieces, it's the scent of your sweat and blood that captivates me more. Let's not mention that disheartening name, she giggled, flipping over to pin the god of war beneath her. Let's talk about more interesting things. Mount Olympus remained a place of song and dance. The gods were immersed in their respective loves, hates, and power games, just as they had been for billions of years. The booming rise of the volcanic kingdom was, to them, merely an insignificant, temporarily ignorable background noise from afar. They had not yet realized. This continuous roar was not mere noise, but the overture to a new era, about to begin. Solar core. The sun god, driving his chariot, had just concluded his daily circuit. But Apollo did not stop to rest in his own temple. Alone, he drove the war chariot, forged of pure light and fire, plunging into the very core of the massive star. This was a forbidden zone that even the gods had to revere, the chaotic source of all light and heat in the universe. The primordial flames, capable of melting a divine body instantly, were no longer the docile light he used during his external circuit. Instead, they had transformed into countless roaring, golden behemoths attempting to tear apart any intruder. Apollo hovered in this raging sea of fire. For the first time, the customary composure and elegance were absent from his incomparably handsome face. In their place was a complex mix of an artist's fervor and the anxiety of one being overtaken by the times. Hermes. Hephaestus, these nascent, unconventional younger brothers were savagely and crudely rewriting the order of Olympus in a way he couldn't comprehend, yet was forced to confront. And he, the ancient god of light, who commanded art and prophecy, felt a palpable crisis of obsolescence beneath their rising brilliance. He could not afford to lose, especially not in the domain of art, where he took the most pride. The shock delivered by the cosmic lyre of starlight still echoed deep within his soul. Furthermore, the conceptual divine bow named solar flare was a fulcrum for him to gain deeper mastery over his dual authorities of light and medicine. Moreover, the act of obtaining the true fire itself was an opportunity for him to challenge his own divine power. Apollo stretched out his hand, his divine power transforming into rains of order, forcefully restraining a lunging flame behemoth as he reached toward the eternal, unextinguishable source at the sun's deepest core. There, a strand of golden flame, pulsing like the heartbeat of the entire star and condensed to its absolute limit, radiated devastating power. The instant Apollo's fingers touched it, a will capable of incinerating all creation violently surged back through his arm. Subdue to me. Divine light erupted from Apollo's golden eyes. The supreme authority of the god of light roared into action, engaging in a fierce contest of strength with the primordial stellar will. After a long struggle, he managed to painstakingly peel away, suppress, and finally store the strand of flame, which seemed to possess its own consciousness, from the star's heart into a divine casket crafted from the core of a laurel tree. The undying true fire was secured. The dark side of the moon. In stark contrast to the sun's eternal heat was the absolute stillness of the far side of the moon. The figure of Artemis, the goddess of the hunt, silently descended like a silver star into the depths of a cold crater, a place untouched by any light. She did not harbor the complicated thoughts that plagued Apollo. Her mind was always taut, focused, and aimed directly at her target, much like the string of her bow. That lame craftsman had shown her a perfect hunting bow, one she could not refuse. That bow would allow her to be a more efficient hunter and better protect the wilderness and creatures she cherished. Therefore, she came. It was that simple. Barefoot, she walked across this eternal silence, composed of cosmic dust and solidified moonlight. However, the silence here was more complex than the mere absence of sound. It was a void, capable of consuming concepts. The presence of any life that stepped here would be continuously erased by this eternal stillness until it completely vanished into nothingness. Artemis could feel her divinity being slowly digested by this land. She reached the bottom of the crater, where the purest yin and coldness, which had never dissipated since the moon's inception, lay deposited. She slowly crouched down, her divine authority as the mistress of the moon and goddess of the hunt unfolding to form an invisible barrier, resisting the erosion originating from the eternal stillness itself. Like a fisherwoman retrieving pearls from the deep sea, she cautiously wrapped her fingers in divine power and probed into the gritty, crystalline substance that emitted a chilling silver glow. The moment she scooped up the handful of moon essence, an absolute coldness and stillness, from the conceptual level violently surged back through her fingertips. Artemis let out a muffled groan, and a flicker of unbearable pain crossed her clear, cold eyes. The moon essence of eternal stillness was secured. Temple of Wisdom. Athena, the goddess of wisdom, was not in a hurry to seek a new weapon for herself, unlike her brother and sister. She sat quietly on a chair carved from olive wood, her gray eyes fixed upon a trophy. On the desk before her, a moonlight hand mirror, borrowed from a certain nymph of the moonlit groves. This was one of the first products off Hephaestus's production line. Athena did not use divine power to spy on the volcano, that was a crude and easily detectable method of reconnaissance. She chose a more sophisticated approach, reverse engineering. The light of wisdom shimmered on her fingertips as she gently brushed the mirror's surface. The mirror's structure, material composition, energy circuitry, and even the subtle, fugue principle contained within were disassembled, analyzed, and reconstructed layer by layer within her divine consciousness. Standardized materials, unheard of methods of metal smelting. Capable of accurately reflecting the radiance of a soul with only minimal energy consumption. The most terrifying thing is, every fraction, every detail of this object possesses an almost absolute, cold, precision, as if it wasn't created, but rather, deduced. For the first time, the usual tranquility was absent from Athena's eyes. In its place was the extreme caution, and a hint of excitement, of a chess player who discovers their opponent has introduced an entirely new opening. She could not use this mirror to directly observe the interior of the volcano. But through this product, she could deduce the terrifying outline of the production system behind it. That was not a craftsman's workshop. It was the nascent form of a civilization. A brand new civilization, fundamentally different from the Olympian system based on bloodline, divine authority, and personal whims, built upon the foundation of logic, order, and efficiency. Hephaestus. She whispered softly, placing this unassuming younger brother, for the first time, in a strategic position equal to her own, one that demanded serious study. She would not make an enemy of him, as that would not serve her interests. Nor would she easily ally with him, for his rise was fraught with too many unknowns. She would only observe, analyze, and deduce. Until she saw clearly which square this piece would ultimately move to on the board. Furrows and the sacred flame. Not all deities in Olympus lived according to the rhythm of intense struggle. Demeter, the goddess of agriculture, was walking among the furrows of the mortal world. She was more concerned with whether this year's wheat ears were plump and worried whether her daughter, whom she was forced to leave in the underworld, felt cold. The roar of the volcano was, to her, merely an occasional, harmless breath of the earth. Hestia, the goddess of the hearth, quietly guarded the sacred flame at the very core of Olympus. She could sense a brand new flame, full of order and creativity, burning fiercely deep within the distant earth. This flame was neither as chaotic as Ares's war fire nor as dazzling as Apollo's divine fire. It was more like an immense hearth, providing sustenance and tools for the entire world. She felt a sense of relief regarding this. Styx Ferry Crossing. At an ancient ferry crossing, perpetually shrouded in mist, beside a tributary of the river Lethe, in the seam between the three realms, the figure of the messenger god, Hermes, quietly materialized. Wearing the omni-sight visor, he gazed at the murky river leading to the underworld, churning with countless departed souls and grudges. Buzz. In his vision, the value and risk of this trip were being frantically refreshed as cold data streams. At the same time, there was something else, the backorder list given to him by Hephaestus. The corner of the god of commerce and thieves' mouth curved slightly upward. Where there is risk, there is reward. The first batch of orders for the volcanic kingdom has been perfectly delivered. Hermes, like the most efficient hummingbird, spread the fiery creativity of the volcanic heart to every corner of the three realms. And the rewards followed. They were categorized by Li Hua and entered into a brand new, special material reserve. From the centaur tribe came hundreds of centaur heartwood, cultivated through secret methods by the most vibrant adult centaurs in their tribe, without harming themselves. This peculiar wood is incredibly tough, yet imbued with the pulse of life, making it an excellent base material for creating animated puppets and growth-type equipment. The fairies of Moonlight Forest, in turn, gifted 3 bottles of moon-chanted nectar, which they had collectively gathered and condensed after 7 consecutive nights of moonlight exposure. This was not an ordinary magic potion, but a precious catalyst capable of cleansing the soul and enhancing divine affinity. These were all specialties, unique to specific groups, unobtainable through conventional mining methods. The second batch of orders brought back by Hermes was even more diverse and tested the furnace of destinies, refined production capabilities. A dryad tree nymph wished to commission a set of gardening tools that could prune sole branches, without harming the tree itself. A music-obsessed satyr desired a set of 7-pipe panpipes that could perfectly mimic the sound of a moonlit waterfall. A well-known river god placed an order for a miniature divine power sluice gate that could automatically adjust water flow according to tides and moon phases. Now, under Li Hua's millisecond-precise scheduling and the tireless roar of the furnace of destiny, these custom products, full of ingenious ideas, have all been completed and lie quietly in the finished goods warehouse, awaiting their owners. He habitually took out the resonance stone from his Y, which was in sync with Hermes, preparing to notify his efficient ally to collect the second batch of goods. However, when he injected his divine sense into it, the expected light and cunning response did not come. The other end of the resonance stone was utterly silent. It wasn't the static of a weak signal, nor the intermittent breaks of external interference. Instead, it was a pure, absolute, non-existence, as if completely isolated by an invisible wall of the world. Hephaestus's eyebrow twitched slightly, but there was no ripple in his heart. He first ruled out the possibility of Hermes encountering misfortune. He had absolute confidence in the realm walker, and all-encompassing vision he had forged, and even more trust in Hermes's slippery ability to save himself. If he couldn't win, running away was definitely not a problem. Therefore, there was only one explanation for something that could block a law-level communication artifact like the resonance stone. Hermes had already begun to execute his underworld exploration plan. Only that kingdom of the dead, independent of the 3 realms and possessing entirely different laws, could completely block the spatial and fate laws that the resonance stone relied upon. Was it to fulfill Charon's order? Or to search for rare materials on the list? Regardless, Hermes was unreachable for the time being. For Hephaestus, the temporary disconnection of his ally meant that this batch of completed orders could not be delivered on time. This was an unacceptable credibility crisis for a rapidly developing power that had just established its brand reputation. It seems that establishing our own logistics channel must be moved up. This plan was already on his agenda. Hermes's disappearance simply elevated the priority of this plan to the highest level. The business territory of the volcanic kingdom would expand to every corner of the world in the future. Relying on Hermes, a top divine messenger, to personally deliver every order was inherently a luxurious and unsustainable model. He needed to establish his own larger, more efficient, and more pervasive logistics network. Hephaestus turned and walked to the other side of the workshop. There, a magical conch shell carved from deep-sea pearls, the deep-sea echo, quietly emitted a soft glow. He picked up the conch and injected a trace of his divine sense into it. Hephaestus decided to use his relationship with the sea goddess Thetis to have the ocean nymphs deliver goods for him. He would provide reasonable compensation, which would not only further strengthen his ties with the sea goddess Thetis and the ocean nymphs. More importantly, the delivery process itself could form an intelligence network spanning the globe. The only problem was that the relationship between Hephaestus and the true ruler of the ocean, Poseidon, was not exactly intimate. One could even say they were archenemies. "Good day, Princess Thetis." The moment Hephaestus's voice fell, the conch in front of him glowed, and a lifelike phantom of the goddess, constructed from mist and light, coalesced into form. Her ink-blue hair flowed with silver threads, like the deep-sea night sky studded with stars. Her skin was warm and smooth as jade, radiating a soft, pearl-like luster. Especially her clear blue-green eyes, like the calmest shallow sea illuminated by sunlight, reflected pure goodwill and ancient wisdom. At the same time, Hephaestus's tall phantom, clad in a craftsman's robe, also appeared in Thetis's crystal palace. "Prince Hephaestus," Thetis's gentle voice came from the phantom, a hint of just the right amount of surprise in her beautiful eyes. "What kind of wind has made you remember your friend in the deep sea?" "It's a wind of sincere cooperation." Hephaestus's phantom remained calm, his gaze fixed on her, cutting straight to the point. "I wish to establish a long-term commercial partnership with you and your nymph sisters throughout the four seas. My volcanic kingdom will provide customized services for all intelligent beings within the three realms. And I need a logistics network that can safely and punctually deliver my products to all corners of the world. The ocean connects all corners of the world. And nymphs are the ocean's most elegant and swift messengers. I hope to employ your sisters to become the volcanic kingdom's ocean carriers." Hephaestus paused, then added, "Of course, this is not a gratuitous request. Every month I will pay a satisfactory remuneration to the nymphs. It can be a piece of jewelry, or any other mass-produced product from the volcanic kingdom. And all carriers will receive an internal discount on products from the volcanic kingdom." Of course, Hephaestus also prepared standards for performance evaluation to prevent the nymphs from slacking off, but now was not the time to mention it. Thetis's phantom fell into a brief silence. Her beautiful face, formed of light and shadow, showed clear contemplation, evidently rapidly digesting the immense amount of information and astonishing commercial scope behind this proposal. This was no longer a simple delivery request. This was an invitation for them to join a new, infinitely potential commercial empire capable of influencing the balance of the three realms. More importantly, the delivery process itself was the most perfect journey to patrol the four seas. They would have the opportunity to visit unfamiliar sea areas they had never been to and meet strange creatures they had never heard of. For the nymphs, who naturally loved freedom and beauty, this itself was fatally attractive. "Your proposal, my sisters and I are, in principle, very interested." Thetis's phantom spoke again, a hint of caution in her beautiful eyes. "However, Prince Hephaestus, there is one issue we must face." Her expression became serious. "The ocean is not without a master. Our king, Poseidon, his attitude towards you is probably not what one would call friendly." "I know." Far from being worried, a confident smile appeared on Hephaestus's phantom face. "That's why I need allies. A group who can agree with my philosophy and are willing to work with me to carve out a new route for free trade in this ocean ruled by a tyrant." His voice, transmitted through light and shadow, carried an undeniable power. "And in return, I promise that the fires of the volcanic kingdom will forever burn for the freedom and beauty of the ocean." Underworld, Acheron Ferry. There was no light, no sound, only endless, hazy mist, and the unconscious, desperate murmurs of countless souls in the river. A figure, like a phantom that did not exist in this world, silently passed through all the patrolling underworld guards, made of death and fear. It was Hermes. He had just completed the hydrological survey of several branches of the underworld rivers, collecting the most crucial first-hand data for the design of Charon's Soul Ferry. He was about to activate the Realm Walker, and quietly depart. Just then, a cold voice, devoid of any emotion, yet seemingly containing the weight of the entire underworld, sounded behind him. Interesting. Hermes's figure stiffened abruptly. He slowly turned around, only to see that the shadows of the ferry, at some unknown point, had coalesced into a tall, black-robed monarch with a handsome but stone-pale face. Hades, the king of the underworld. I didn't catch you last time, but I finally encountered you this time. Hades's gaze, as if able to see through the essence of the soul, fell upon Hermes. How did you enter the underworld? Hermes's heart tightened, but his face instantly transformed into his characteristic, harmless smile. He raised the golden caduceus in his hand, the twin snakes at its top radiating the sacred light of Olympus. I am a divine messenger, and this staff can prove it. Divine messenger. A cold, humorless curve appeared at the corner of Hades's mouth. Then why are you sneaking around? The underworld, Acheron ferry crossing. Hermes felt as though his very soul had been frozen by the absolute stillness and death contained within those pale eyes. This was the first time since his birth that he had felt such pure hierarchical suppression, a pressure that could not be escaped through speed. Hades, king of the underworld. Simply by standing there, he became a realm unto himself, separated from life and death. But Hermes was Hermes, after all. After the initial stiffness, his mind, protected by the thought veil, began racing at an unprecedented speed. It is precisely because I am a divine messenger that I must be sneaky. Hermes bowed slightly, his posture humble, yet his words were meticulously crafted. Great king of the underworld, your domain is the supreme sanctuary where the departed rest, demanding absolute solemnity and order. If I were to arrive with great fanfare, the divine radiance of Olympus upon me might disturb the slumbering souls, that would be an offense to your majesty. Hades' bottomless eyes narrowed slightly, seemingly amused by the explanation. So, you are concerned for my order. Precisely, Hermes replied, his face earnest. Does the fact that my domain values quiet and order mean that thieves are welcome to sneak in? Hades cut through Hermes' flattery. Hermes quickly added, not only that, but my visit is also at the behest of your subordinate, the great ferryman Charon. He commissioned my ally, Hephaestus, lord of Mount Etna and god of the forge, to craft him an eternal soul ferry that will never decay. Lord Hephaestus holds this most important commission from the underworld in the highest regard. He believes that only by personally surveying the hydrology of the river Styx and sensing the weight of the departed souls can he forge a perfect creation worthy of the underworld's majesty. Therefore, he entrusted me, his most trusted messenger, to come and gather this data. The explanation was flawless, instantly transforming an illegal intrusion into a preliminary survey, filled with respect. Hades said nothing, merely watching him silently, his eyes seeming to convey, continue your performance. Hermes inwardly groaned, but he knew this was the moment for the omniscient view to activate. He activated the thought veil, hiding all his true intentions behind an absolute, impenetrable mist, and then activated the scale of value, beginning a frantic analysis of the underworld king's needs. Buzz, in his vision, a massive data stream concerning Hades rapidly refreshed. Base value. Absolute ruler of the underworld, primordial deity, power level equivalent to Zeus and Poseidon. Potential value. Tired of the endless conflicts on Mount Olympus. Desires an absolutely stable and orderly kingdom. Relational value. Relationship with brothers Zeus and Poseidon is cold and distant. Data inference. Will maintain a highly neutral observation stance toward the newly rising volcano kingdom, which centers on order and creation. The final piece of information greatly reassured Hermes. Hades was not an enemy, at least not right now. Of course, Hermes shifted his tone, speaking with greater sincerity. My ally also believes that since we are serving the underworld, we naturally cannot only take the esteemed Charon's opinion into account. He bowed slightly and offered the king of the underworld the true bait, one that would tempt any sovereign. He hopes to have the opportunity to personally hear your will, your majesty. Perhaps you require a scythe capable of severing the resentments of fate. A scale that can precisely judge every soul. Or perhaps a suit of armor forged from silent obsidian that would keep your three-headed hound, Cerberus, comfortable. Whatever your need, the fires of the volcano can forge it for you. Hades finally reacted. A faint, almost imperceptible ripple crossed his pale eyes. He remained silent for a long time, the sheer pressure seeming to freeze even the sound of the Acheron's flowing water. Finally, he spoke slowly, his voice still cold, but without the previous absolute oppression. Tell Hephaestus. I dislike uninvited guests. However, I appreciate valuable sincerity. Have him build the ferry well. If I am satisfied, I will consider becoming his next client. As soon as he finished speaking, Hades' figure silently melted into the shadows, as if he had never been there. Only then did Hermes realize that his back was drenched in cold sweat. He dared not linger for a moment, immediately activating Realm Walker, plotting the fastest route, and vanishing as a streak of light near the edge of the underworld. The Volcano Kingdom. Hephaestus had already reached a preliminary cooperation agreement with Thetis. Considering Poseidon's threat, they did not publicly issue invitations to all the ocean nymphs. Instead, Thetis personally selected a dozen of her most trustworthy sisters with the widest range of activity to serve as the first batch of ocean carriers, initiating a trial run of the logistics network. At this moment, the Forge of Destiny continued its tireless roar. Although there were no new external orders for the time being, its internal production sequence never paused. Under Lihua's control, the most basic Tier 1 materials continuously transported by the geomantic worker ants were systematically processed into higher-grade strategic reserves imbued with special properties. In the smelting pool, ordinary bronze ingots merged with the unique lava ash from the volcano heart, giving birth to the Tier 2 material, molten fire copper, whose heat resistance far surpassed ordinary metals. On the other side, the rarer moon chant nectar was carefully dripped into pure silver. The laws of soul cleansing and lunar serenity contained within the nectar refined the mundane silver ore, elevating it into the Tier 4 material, moonlight mithril, capable of bearing divinity. It not only soothes the mind but also serves as a perfect conductor for complex divine power circuits. Following this, in the most critical area of the workshop, a piece of centaur heartwood was used as the core of life, and the newly created moonlight mithril was used as the guide for spirit. Both were tempered together with the purest molten metal. The result was a small piece of Tier 5 material, the animated heart, capable of slow self-repair and even possessing a faint self-awareness. It was the crucial cornerstone for entering the domain of life. This was the true foundation of the Volcano Kingdom. Just as Hephaestus was immersed in this creative accumulation, the resonance stone in his arms finally delivered a delayed vibration. My friend. I'm back. Hermes' voice sounded a little tired, but mostly, it was the exhilaration of having survived a close call. I just got out of that cursed place where you can't even smell the wind. Listen, I saw Hades himself. He quickly and concisely recounted the thrilling encounter he had just experienced, along with the king of the underworld's final message. He's interested. He's interested in us. Charon's commission is the stepping stone. We must complete it with the highest quality. This might be our only chance to penetrate the underworld market. Hephaestus listened quietly, his mind rapidly processing the massive amount of information hidden behind the news. Trading with Hades, king of the underworld, this was undoubtedly dancing on a knife's edge, but the potential rewards were unimaginably vast. However, before he could delve deeper, another artifact spontaneously lit up. It was Thetis initiating an emergency communication via the deep-sea echo. Lord Hephaestus. Thetis' gentle phantom appeared, but her beautiful blue-green eyes were now filled with deep worry and confusion. Something has happened. She skipped the pleasantries and cut straight to the chase. Recently, a batch of new moonlight hand mirrors has been circulating among the many islands of the Aegean Sea. Their appearance and divine energy fluctuations are almost identical to the works you traded with the nymphs. Many unsuspecting nymph sisters assumed they were new products from your volcano kingdom and bought them immediately. But Thetis' expression became extremely grave. All the sisters who used those hand mirrors saw not the pure radiance of their own souls, but their ugliest, darkest sides magnified infinitely. Many sisters have become unsettled, troubled by nightmares day and night, and their divinity has been corrupted, as if they have fallen victim to some malicious curse. Hephaestus' gaze instantly turned icy. He had never sold a single batch of moonlight hand mirrors to the ocean. These were malicious counterfeits aimed directly at destroying his reputation. Lihua. Without needing to offer Thetis any explanation, he turned and issued a command. Search the database using the keywords, ocean, artisan, and curse. Command received. Searching. A golden flash appeared in Lihua's eye, and a line of ancient information surfaced on the main control screen. Telchines. Ancient marine artisans, descendants of Gia and Pontus. Innate masters of metalworking and sorcery, proficient in curses and illusions. They were expelled and cursed by the gods for their depravity and blasphemy, and now dwell permanently in deep-sea forbidden zones. Hephaestus looked at the information, a cold curve forming on his lips. A group of failures long since eliminated by the times would not seek trouble with him for no reason. There must be an entity behind them, driving them and providing them protection. And that entity could only be Poseidon. On one side was the eternal sovereign of the underworld, casting bait from the silent shadows, setting a test of both value and risk with a massive transaction concerning the future. On the other side was the furious ruler of the deep sea, bearing his fangs in the surging waves, launching an attack meant to destroy both reputation and survival through a malicious war. An invitation from the underworld promised a future of order, a declaration of war from the deep sea foretold a present of destruction. Standing before the forge fire, Hephaestus heard, for the first time, the simultaneous knocking of opportunity and crisis. The invitation from the underworld and the declaration of war from the deep sea lay simultaneously before Hephaestus. He stood before the furnace fire, his face showing no sign of difficulty. Only children make choices. He was the king of the volcano, the god of craftsmen and fire. He chose to work on both fronts simultaneously. He was not the only top craftsman in the volcanic kingdom. Li Hua. Hephaestus's voice was calm, echoing without a ripple in the massive core control room. I am here, Father God. Summon Brontes, Steropus, and Argas. I have a new task to assign. A moment later, the three colossal cyclops respectfully stood before him, their massive single eyes filled with concentration. A brand new mission, one that will let your names echo across the three realms once more, awaits you. Hephaestus concisely informed them of the commission from Hades, the king of the underworld. We are to forge an unprecedented, soul ferry, for the underworld. It will sail upon the river Lethe, bear the weight of the departed souls, resist the corrosion of resentment, and manifest the supreme majesty of the underworld. This project is complex and sacred. A flicker of instinctive awe toward the sovereign of the underworld first crossed the Cyclops' single eyes. Immediately afterward, that awe was replaced by a hotter fervor and competitiveness, unique to master craftsmen. Since the furnace of destiny became automated, your hands have not personally forged a great work in a long time. Now, I entrust the design and initial forging of this vessel entirely to you. In the single eyes of the three giants, an unbelievable, blazing fire instantly ignited. Their king was entrusting such a crucial mission entirely to them. This was not just a task, it was trust, it was glory. My lord, we. Brontes's voice trembled slightly with excitement. All the data you require, such as the hydrological measurements of the river Styx, which Hermes has completed, and all relevant records of the underworld, were in Lihua's core database, and are now fully accessible to you. Go, utilize it, study it, deduce from it. Pour all the skill and pride of your millennia into this creation. Should you encounter a bottleneck on a critical issue, I will personally intervene. Go, and let me see what kind of miracle the greatest craftsman of my volcanic kingdom can achieve. The three giants remained silent for a long moment. They slowly rose, no longer kneeling, but straightened their mountain-like chests and performed the oldest craftsman's salute toward their king, a chest pound signifying commitment and honor. We shall not fail the mission, my lord. They strode quickly toward their dedicated research workshop, impatient to pour their talent onto this brand new canvas. Having settled the underworld's commission, Hephaestus's gaze instantly shifted from warm expectation to icy sharpness. He picked up the resonance stone corresponding to Hermes. Now, it was time to launch this battle of credibility. The moment the divine consciousness connected, Hermes' slightly tired but still spirited voice came through. My friend, are you satisfied with the Underworld survey report? I guarantee, every single piece of data is. The report is perfect. Hephaestus cut him off. But now, we have a more urgent problem. He quickly informed Hermes of the intelligence brought by Thetis, along with his own judgment. That is the situation. Poseidon has fired the first shot in his trade war. The other end of the resonance stone fell silent for a moment. What a treacherous viper. Hermes' voice turned cold. He intends to destroy everything we painstakingly built, right from the roots. Exactly. Therefore, I need you, my swiftest messenger, to immediately declare my will to the three realms. Speak, my ally. I will convey every single word with precision. First, you must find every sentient being who has purchased our products, whether they are centaurs or nymphs. On my behalf, you must acknowledge a fact to them. Malicious creations, counterfeit works bearing my name and capable of corrupting the soul, have appeared on the market. Second, you must convey my most sincere apologies and condolences to all our dear friends who have been frightened or harmed by this, and tell them that the fires of the volcano will be with them. Third, I promise that the volcanic kingdom will bear all purification costs incurred and will provide every victim with a brand new protective ornament, free of charge, capable of soothing the soul. Fourth, inform everyone that soon, every creation from my volcanic kingdom will possess a unique and absolutely unforgeable mark of the volcano. At that time, I will make the method of verification public. Fifth, until then, I strongly urge all friends to cease acquiring any creation of the volcanic kingdom from any channel not authorized by me or by you, Hermes. Finally, declare to the three realms, I, Hephaestus, will not tolerate this despicable behavior that desecrates creation and harms the innocent. The flames of investigation have been lit. No matter who they are, or how deep the abyss they hide in, they will be dragged out by me and pay the price of the forge. Hermes listened to everything in silence. Flawless, responsible, strategic, and deterrent. He praised. You were born to be a king. Don't worry, this battle of public opinion is in my hands. There is one more thing, Hephaestus added. Ostensibly, you are to reassure the clients. But secretly, I need your swift legs to help me track down the true source and flow of these counterfeit goods. That suits me perfectly. Hermes' laughter carried a hint of the coldness belonging to the god of thieves. The communication ceased. Hephaestus put down the resonance stone, knowing the horn of the public opinion war had sounded. But this only treated the symptoms, not the root cause. As long as the enemy could still imitate his products, this attack would never cease. He had to add a barrier to his products that no one could breach. A perfect anti-counterfeiting mark. Use more complex craftsmanship. Use a more intricate emblem. Hephaestus shook his head. That would only lead to a meaningless, fruitless arms race against the Telchines. Those ancient monsters, the Telchines, might be ideologically corrupt, but their skill itself was not to be underestimated. His gaze swept over the majestic volcano beneath his feet, which emitted a steady rumble, finally locking onto its heart. The crystal of wrath, condensed from Typhon's fury. This was a unique product of Mount Etna. An unreplicable specialty that could only be born here. Any outsider who dared to step foot here to try and steal this material would be equivalent to walking straight into a trap. Li Hua. I am here, Father God. Immediately modify the molds on all production lines to reserve a standardized recess for every product about to leave the factory. Command received. Please define the specifications and purpose of the recess, Father God. Hephaestus stretched out his hand, and a strand of golden fire of creation, along with a strand of dark fire of annihilation, ignited simultaneously in his palm. I require a binding and self-destruct fugue protocol. He injected the two divine fires into the runic model that Li Hua displayed for him. Fugue. True name imprint and fugue. Dust of an instant. A double fugue. The former would, soul bind, a microparticle of the crystal of wrath to the product carrying it, at the level of fundamental laws. The latter was a hidden instruction. The moment the system detected the crystal of wrath being forcibly stripped away, or the product's structure being tampered with or reverse engineered, this instruction would instantly trigger, causing the crystal, along with the will of Typhon contained within, to revert to the purest, irreversible annihilation, turning into a useless pinch of dust. Hephaestus picked up a previously completed moonlight hand mirror. Under his will, a small recess appeared on the back of the hand mirror. From the filter of the siphon pipe, he carefully took out a grain of sand-sized fragment of highly purified crystal of wrath and meticulously embedded it into the recess. Buzz. The entire hand mirror trembled slightly. The crystal, nestled in the recess, emitted a faint, dark red glow that flickered like breathing. It was like a tiny heart, yet full of savage vitality, adding a searing pulse from the depths of the earth to this creation that had previously only possessed the cool luster of moonlight. This was the mark of the volcano. This was the roar of Typhon. And more than that, this was Hephaestus's silent warning to all covetous eyes. My creations, you cannot imitate. My fire, you cannot steal. Thanks for watching.